Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto and Hinata become Hanyou. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Saemon and link in the description and support writer. Let's start the video. Prologue. It came at midnight with little warning. Like a force of nature, it would destroy everything in its path until its anger was satisfied. And like any other force of nature, the nine-tailed fox seemed completely out of control as it leveled the landscape around it. Not a single thought was spared on the destruction it was causing. Its chakra was a bright blood and littered with emotions. Emotions of hatred, fury and malice. The chakra blasted from the creature in impossible, knocking everything around it as if they were mere specks of dust caught in a hurricane. Slowly walking towards the village, it began to thrash about even more than before. This caused its nine tails to further demolish the flora around it. Every Konoha ninja available above genin rank gathered at the south gate to defend their home against the invader. Although few that had gathered they were sure they could stall it, let alone defeat it. Quicker than a blink of the eye, every Anbu and their captain appeared before the nervous group of shinobi. It was expected that they would be this way, breaking the shinobi code that dictates that a ninja must have no emotions. The most cold-hearted assassins would cower in fear at the killer intent the beast was blasting at the populace. The pressure was so great that a great many ninja were having trouble breathing, and a few were even reaching for their weapons, preparing to take their own life to end the suffering, to end the pure rage that was beating down upon them. The Anbu captain also felt the pressure of the beast's enormous amount of fury. It was like there was an immeasurable amount of weight bearing down on his very soul, crushing it, grinding it into dust. Glancing around, he noticed that many of his fellow shinobi were also suffering heavily. If anyone were to look at the Anbu gathered, many would think that were unaffected by the demon's killer intent, as their masked faces showed nothing. The captain knew his men well and could tell from the subtle movements of their bodies that they were terrified. With a long sad sigh the Anbu captain looked up into the eyes of those gathered before him. He knew many would die before the night was out. They all knew it too. Letting out another sigh he addressed all those in front of him. Fellow shinobi. We of the village hidden in the leaves have stood for over 100 years and fought many great battles which raged on for many years that have left both sides wounded. But after every war, who is the first to regain their standings? Who is the first to launch a counter-strike that outsmarts our enemies? Who is the village that has the finest and strongest shinobi and is the greatest of the great 5 hidden villages? The ninja around the captain looked up as he spoke those words. They weren't completely awe-inspiring, but it reminded some, especially those who had fought in wars, of what they were here for. They were here to defend their country, their village, their home. The captain was pleased that he had at least gained there. We are the village that has survived through the toughest challenges and disasters and still lived. This is just one more challenge that we the ninja from the village hidden in the leaves must face, and we will face it head-on with courage and without regret. The 4th Hokage has designed a way to stop the beast, but it will take time. Our mission is to stall the demon as long as possible so that we can give the 4th enough time to finish his final preparations. We are shinobi and today we fight for our home. We fight for our way of life. We fight with the will of fire itself and for the future of our village so we will win. For Konoha. As the Anbu captain yelled, he reached into his weapon pouch and withdrew 3 kunai in each hand and ran in the direction of the approaching kitsune. The Anbu and his fellow ninja followed, all with a small look of determination and pride in their eyes. The 4th Hokage looked over his village from his office for the last time. All that he treasured, all that he loved, and all that he held precious was within this small part of the world. He was certainly willing to give up his life for it to remain safe. He looked over to the raging beast that his fellow shinobi were trying to keep the beast at bay. But if anything, they just angered it more. He looked at the fallen and falling shinobi and realized that he had better hurry up before it was too late and the village fell. The 4th knew that he could never defeat the beast, but he could stop it. He could seal it away. Grabbing what he needed and his most precious object in the world, he jumped out of the window, landing on the quickly summoned Great Toad Boss, Gamabunta. He continued to observe the fox, while Gamabunta placed his webbed hand on his sword. Slowly pulling back the covers, he glanced down with eyes full of love and traces of sadness and regret at his most precious thing in the world, even more so than his beloved wife. His son. The little blonde boy was silently sleeping in his father's arms without a care for or knowledge of the world around him. Silently the 4th let a tear drop from his eye as he realized of what he was about to do to his son. The 4th slowly began to perform the sequences of hand signs needed for his latest and last jutsu. Before his jutsu was finished, however, he felt 2 very familiar chakra signatures heading towards him. He turned his head slowly and gave a sad smile to another 2 of the precious people in his life. His predecessor, Sarutobi, and his sensei, Jiraiya. Lord Hokage. Please reconsider this and let another do it for you. I would gratefully give up my life to allow you to live with your son. I am old and have already lived a happy life, yours has barely started. Sarutobi pleaded with the man whom he now saw as a grandson. Hey old man. What have I told you about calling me Lord Hokage? It makes me sound old. And no, I cannot allow you to do it for me. I am the only one capable of performing this jutsu, and I will not have another be sacrificed instead of me. That's the Hokage's job. It's what I decided. I could never defeat the fox, but by sacrificing my life I can seal it. I will not allow anything to harm those precious to me. Sarutobi looked at his successor and gave a small chuckle. You know, Minato, you haven't changed a bit and you haven't allowed the title of Hokage to go to your head either. Regardless, I still should take your place. Think of your son. He will need you. Sarutobi again pleaded with Minato, but it looked like nothing would change his mind. You should listen to him, Gaki, he's older than you and knows what he's on about. The villagers will not take this lightly and are bound to think of your son as the fox instead of the container. They will need your reassurance and he will need you as well. Jiraiya stepped forward to assist his sensei, as they both knew of the problems that this would cause Minato's son later on in life. Minato shook his head at his father and grandfather and gave a small sigh before answering them. You both should have a little more faith in the villagers, they will only see Naruto as a hero and their savior. They could never think so little of the one that protects them all day, every single day. And besides, I need you, Sarutobi, to tell Kushina-chan that I'm sorry and that I love her with all my heart and soul. At this point both Jiraiya and Sarutobi faced their heads down to the ground and Minato instantly knew something was wrong. What? What is it? Sarutobi slowly lifted his head and looked into his grandson's eyes, almost breaking down into tears. It's Kushina. She died shortly after childbirth. The strain of the fox's charka in the village was just too much for her body. I'm sorry, Minato, she's gone. Sarutobi continued to look at his grandson's eyes and could see a vast array of emotions flowing endlessly. Minato looked down and his tears began to freefall from his face. Not only had his wife died but Naruto would lose both his mother and his father on his birth night. Neither of them would get to raise him, teach him morals and the ways of a ninja, or see him grow up and possibly marry. They wouldn't get to see their grandchildren either. A massive roar from the fox quickly ended his thoughts and he turned quickly back to face it. It seemed to have noticed him and Gamabunta and actually looked excited. But Minato wouldn't allow it any satisfaction. Quickly finishing the last two hand signs he turned to Jiraiya and Sarutobi once more and said, "So long father, grandfather. I shall see you on the other side when you join my wife and me. Take good care of my son and make sure he is loved and looked after well like he deserves." Turning to his son, woken thanks to the roar, Minato wiped the tears from his face and gave Naruto a gentle kiss on the forehead. He ruffled his thin, blonde locks. Minato smiled at his son's small little chuckle, but that quickly turned to a frown when he felt his jutsu take hold. To him, it felt like his soul was being stabbed from behind. However, judging by the fox's roars, it felt even worse. The beast's howling intensified as its charka began swirling around with force strong that blew away every ninja around it, as well as many houses and trees. They were like sand in a hurricane. Suddenly, a bright white light surrounded Minato and spread through the entirety of Konoha and the nine-tailed fox. Then, as quickly as it came, it vanished, as did the fox. Cheers erupted from every remaining villager and ninja of Konoha. They didn't know how, but the fourth Hokage had defeated the fox and saved them all. They were all right in a way, but soon they would find out how much it actually cost him. Some turned to look for the fourth Hokage atop Gamabunta's head, but all they found was a man screaming in pain and coughing up blood as he carefully clutched a small object wrapped in cloth that wailed just as loud as he. Minato slowly stopped coughing and his pain began to ebb away. His death was near. As he fell on his back, he slowly cradled his son in his arms. By the sounds of it, his son must have endured as much if not more pain than he did. The boy was now unconscious and unmoving. He noticed that the seal he designed had worked and had appeared on his son's stomach. Ruffling his son's hair for the last time, he spoke with a raspy voice as he said his farewell. "Goodbye my son, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I love you my son," and with his last words said his eyes closed and his rocking stopped. Minato, the yellow flash of Konoha, the fourth Hokage, was dead. Slowly coming out of the shock of realizing that his surrogate grandson was dead, Sarutobi walked towards the fallen Hokage. Checking Minato's body, his tears once again began to flow as he found nothing to indicate life. Slowly moving his head over to the small bundle in Minato's arms, he gently lifted Naruto up and cradled him in his own. Jiraiya walked to his sensei and placed a comforting hand on his shoulders. Without warning Sarutobi felt a great heat emerge from Naruto. It was so great he jumped back from shock and accidentally dropped the little infant. Naruto was stopped in midair by a swirl of red charka. The hot charka quickly burned through the cloth to reveal a squirming Naruto under them. "Jiraiya. What is going on? Is the seal not holding?" Sarutobi yelled to his student. Jumping into action, Jiraiya landed beside Naruto and placed his hand in between the flames of red charca to check the seal on Naruto's stomach. He's fine and so is the seal. But his body is violently reacting to the small amounts of the fox's charca that is supposed to leak through the seal. It has happened to many Jinchuriki before but never this severe. I don't know if his body will take it. Jiraiya explained to his sensei, quickly removing his now scorched arm from the flames. Jiraiya and Sarutobi watched in horror as Naruto thrashed violently, his body reacting to the massive quantities of the fox's charca. This shouldn't be happening, Jiraiya. The seal should only allow a very minute amount of the fox's charca to leak out. Not this much. Sarutobi was sure something was wrong, but the look he saw in Jiraiya's eyes confirmed that it wasn't, which confused Sarutobi even more. This is a very minute amount of the fox's charca. Think about it, sensei, the creature's charca is nearly limitless. I just hope that Naruto is able to survive. He has already lost too much tonight. We can't expect him to lose his own life as well. Jiraiya continued to stare at the thrashing Naruto while clutching his still very burnt arm. They both watched as the small infant, barely an hour old, screamed in a pained silence. He was subjected to more pain than most would feel in a lifetime. Then, without warning, the charca slowed almost to a crawl and spread about his body. The charca flowed quickly, then slowly, as it was absorbed back into the little baby's body. As it did, Naruto thrashed even more violently. After about 10 minutes of this process, the charca gathered at 3 specific places. His head, his stomach and his rear. Sarutobi and Jiraiya continued to watch in horror as physical changes began on Naruto's body. The first was 3 small whisker-like marks appearing on either side of his cheek. The second was teeth emerging and begging to sharpen and grow, especially his canines. His hair grew slightly longer and his nails grew and sharpened. Sarutobi and Jiraiya both watched as his ears began to just disappear. Within seconds his ears were completely gone, but what arose in their stead made Jiraiya almost lose his lust for young ladies and Sarutobi almost wish he were filling out paperwork. 2 small fox ears grew atop young Naruto's head. They were reddish with light cream white tips. However, this was not the last change. At almost the same time, Naruto began to sprout a foxtail of the same colors. As his appendage finished its growth, the chakra that was flowing around and into him simply dissipated into thin air, leaving the newly made Hanyou, Naruto, to drop back on top of the Chief Toad's head. His thrashing had ended and he had fallen unconscious from the pain. Compared to how he was before, he looked peaceful, as all newborns should be. Jiraiya was the first to recover from his shock and slowly walked towards the small boy. He placed his hand on the kid's neck and checked for a pulse. He sighed when he felt it, which was quite strong too considering what had just transpired. He then proceeded to check Naruto's seal. It was still intact and completely undamaged. He cautiously picked Naruto up, cradling him carefully in his arms. It seems we have the first Hanyou since the tailed demons were first sought after, over 75 years ago. Jiraiya said with sadness. Sarutobi, who had now also recovered from his shock, stood next to Jiraiya. They both jumped off Gamabunta's head and landed back in the Hokage Tower. If you need the help of the Toads with anything in the little brat's life, just let me know. I owe his father a great many debts and I would hate to see what he loved most, hated and despised by what he holds, and now sadly resembles. And with that said, the great Chief Toad returned to his home in a great puff of smoke. Sarutobi now held Naruto and wept. He would hate to imagine what little Naruto's life would be like now. He brought the little Hanyou close to his chest and gave him a grand fatherly hug. Naruto seemed to relax from the hug and gave a little babied sigh. If only I could adopt you, Naruto, your life would be much better, but the stupid council would never allow it. You may have had a chance before, you may have only been ignored by the villagers and perhaps glared at occasionally but now I would hate to think what your life would be like now. Sarutobi was busy trying to think of ways to help the poor little Hanyou when Naruto began to stir. Jiraiya and Sarutobi looked down at the stirring infant with sad eyes. Naruto slowly looked back at the 2 men and gave a little giggle when he felt Sarutobi's beard tickle his cheek. Sarutobi smiled at the child in his arms and watched him try to pull on his beard. He jumped quickly back when he felt something touch his stomach before realizing that it was the little Hanyou's tail. It was twitching slightly back and forth, obviously showing that the child had little control over it. He reached under the child and lifted his tail up with one hand and rested it on the child's stomach. Naruto became instantly fascinated with the strange appendage and began to slightly tug on it. Sarutobi found himself enjoying the scene before him as it reminded him of his younger days with his own children. Suddenly Naruto's fox ears twitched to the right, quickly followed by his little head. Sarutobi marveled at how quickly the baby had function of his limbs. In just a few hours he could move his own head and hands as well as twitch his tail and ears. Sarutobi followed the direction of Naruto's face and couldn't see anything. Several minutes later he started to see civilians and ninja heading his way. Glancing down at Naruto then back at the crowd slowly gathering, he sighed. They are not going to like this, Jiraiya. They will order his death in revenge of those lost to the fox. They might even accuse Naruto of being the fox because he is a Hanyou. Jiraiya looked at his sensei with a still pain in his eyes. Will you let them? Naruto never did anything to them, but they won't see him as a savior. They will hate and despise him, and so will their children. What will you do? I may not be allowed to adopt him myself because the council won't allow it. But that doesn't mean I can't create a few laws to prevent him from suffering because of their blindness. Looking back down to the baby that was now almost asleep again in his arms, he wished that there was more that he could do. Let's just hope that you will be able to find happiness in your life, young Naruto. You would have had a much easier time before but not now. I will do what I can to help you, Naruto. I just wish your parents were here to help you where I can't. And with that he left, Jiraiya now holding Naruto to go and explain to the village what had transpired tonight and of a few laws that he was going to enforce. Maybe you had a little too much faith in the village, Minato. Chapter 1. The Life of a Hanyou. 5 years later, Naruto ran as fast as his little legs could carry him. His 2 fox ears twitched right and left, scanning for sounds to help him escape. Now 5 years old, Naruto's physical appearance had grown to resemble a normal, if slightly underweight, 5-year-old. His hair had grown longer in every direction. It was just a spiky mess. It had, however, grown long enough to cover where his human ears used to be. Naruto had also fully learned how to control his ears, nose, and tail, using them to his fullest advantage. However, despite what one would think, Naruto only used his enhanced senses of smell and hearing to keep him safe from the vengeful villagers that constantly attack him. Naruto never knew why they hated him so much. They would always say harsh words to him, such as demon and monster. They would hurt him in any way they saw fit. Sometimes they would decide he needed a beating for something they said he had done. Other times, they just beat him for the hell of it. It hurt and confused the young boy that all the adults would treat him this way. It confused him even more so when they would treat all the other kids his age with love and kindness. Other kids got food. He had asked on many occasions why they kept treating him this way, but the usual reply was an unsatisfactory. You deserve it, you little fox demon. Naruto could understand the fox part. After all, he looked like a fox. According to the old man Hokage, he was the last of a clan who possessed a Keki Genkai, a unique clan-dependent bloodline trait. This one gave them the appearance and abilities of different animals, and his happened to be a fox. The demon part made no sense to him, however. What he had learned of a demon in his short life was that they are forces of evil who find joy and pleasure in killing others and destroying things. Naruto was nothing like that, or at least he thought he wasn't. If he wasn't a demon, why were the villagers always so mean to him? Naruto had always wanted to know why they did this and why they told their kids to leave him alone or bully him. The adults never let their kids play with him. Naruto loved to play, but he never got to, as he was excluded from others in the orphanage. So after they threw him out for a reason he never knew, he decided to make some friends. Unfortunately, parents always got angry and chased him away or did worse. This was the reason for his current predicament. Naruto found a little girl in the park who was sitting near his tree. He had started living in this tree since he was thrown out of the orphanage because he couldn't find where the old man lived. He decided to ask if she wanted to play with him. She obviously hadn't met or heard of him before, as she was nice to him and agreed to play. She had short blonde hair and bright blue eyes that were much like his own. She wore bright purple clothing. From what Naruto could decipher from her quick-paced speech, her name was Ino and she was from the Yamanaka clan. She also asked in an equally quick-paced speech why he had fox ears and a tail. Giving her the story he was told seemed to satisfy her curiosity, but not her fascination. She repetitively tugged on his tail for entertainment. After telling each other about themselves and a little bit about their lives, which wasn't very much considering they were only 5, Naruto asked if she wanted to climb trees with him. That was one of his favorite pastimes because his clawed hands and feet made it easy. She agreed. At first, Ino had some trouble with the task, but soon she was able to climb a meter off the ground thanks to Naruto's assistance with his tails. At the top of this small tree, the two continued their talk about anything and everything. After a while, they both got bored and Ino suggested that they play tag. Naruto, not knowing how to play, asked her about the rules. After explaining the game to him, Naruto helped her down and proclaimed that he was it. After giving her 20 seconds to run away, Naruto began chasing his chase. She wasn't really fast compared to Naruto, so he easily caught her. Just as he was about to reach out and tag her, she turned slightly to avoid him. She failed this maneuver and instead of being tagged, she was scratched by his clawed fingers on her shoulder. Realizing that he had hurt the girl, Naruto halted and asked if she was alright. She began to slightly tear up as her arm registered that it was hurt. Naruto rushed to help her as much as he could, feeling very guilty of what he had done. Before Naruto could assist her, however, he heard a woman's voice yell, "You little demon. Get away from my daughter." Jumping back quickly, he looked around to see who had addressed him. Fear caught hold of him when he saw a very enraged older version of Ino rushing towards him. He assumed from her previous statement that she was Ino's mother. He backed down, his tail between his legs. Ino's mother kneeled next to her daughter and asked if she was okay. I'm fine mother, it was just an accident. We were playing and Ino was cut off by her mother who was now diving for Naruto. She grabbed him by his arm and lifted him into the air. You hurt my daughter, you little monster. How dare you touch her? Ino's mother, clutching the little Hanyou in her hand, lifted him higher and slammed a fist into his face. He was sent flying through the air and he crashed into a tree. 3 nearby heard someone yell of a demon touching someone's daughter. They rushed to the parents' aid to see an almost unconscious Naruto stagger to his feet and hold his head. Ino couldn't believe what her mother had done. She rushed to help Naruto when she felt a hand on her shoulder. She stopped. Don't worry, Ino-chan. I won't let him hurt you or anyone else again. Turning to the 3 men she decided to enlist their help. You 3. Don't just stand there. Help me punish the demon. He hurt my daughter. Ino's mouth almost hit the ground and she had trouble trying to speak as she heard her mother actually ask them to help her hurt Naruto. The 3 men turned to face Naruto with cold eyes. Naruto remembered their faces as ones who had hurt him before. Once, when he was eating some food out of a bin, they accused him of stealing it. Since he didn't have any money, they decided to take it out of his hide. He shivered at the memory and tried to look for somewhere to run. His thinking was cut short as the 3 men shouted to him. You can't run this time, demon. We will get you and make you pay for what you did to this little girl. With that, they charged Naruto. Ino tried to yell out for them to stop, but her cries went on deaf ears. Naruto, realizing that he was really in for it this time, took a quick place at Ino, who had started crying at what was happening then ran. Naruto ran as fast as his little legs could carry him. His 2 fox ears twitched right and left, scanning for sounds to help him escape. His face was bleeding from the mother's punch. He had really done it this time. He could tell by the look in their eyes that they were going to kill him. Naruto had been hurt before, but never had he felt as much anger as he did when she punched him. He couldn't understand why all the adults did this to him. He tried to explain that it was an accident and so did Ino, but once again they didn't listen. Naruto quickly turned a corner and dropped down to all fours. He could always run faster when he ran like that. But, just before he took off again, he felt a sharp pain in both of his legs and fell face first as his legs dropped from beneath him. Crawling into a sitting position, he looked at his legs and saw a shuriken in each. Looking up, he saw the 3 men and Ino's mother running towards him. One of the men had a kunai ready and another had a katana pulled out. The last was starting a sequence of hand signs. This was it. He was really going to die. Still looking towards his oncoming attackers, Naruto began to cry, not out of pain from the shuriken, but out of fright for the pain about to come. Landing in front of him, the 4 ninja glared evilly and began to give a light laugh at the sight before them. The little demon fox was cowering, pretending to cry and look innocent by drooping his ears and tail and whimpering. Then one of the men, the one with the katana, took 2 steps forward. Ha! You think that pretending to cry will save you? I will make you pay for what you did to me. And this woman's child. And all of Konoha. Practically screaming the last part, he plunged his sword done right through Naruto's left arm and into the ground, effectively pinning him. Naruto's screams ran throughout their ears, but this only seemed to encourage them. Standing back and letting another take his place, a tearful Naruto glanced up at his next attacker and cowered before him, curling his tail close to him. Sadly, before he had it safely tucked under him, the second man threw a kunai through it, holding it in place as well. Naruto again screamed from the enormous pain rushing through his system and attempted to pull out the kunai with his free hand. This hand too was quickly pinned down, but this time by the foot of Ino's mother. Her eyes bore down upon him, filled with hate. Why did they always treat him like this? Why did they always look at him with such hate and disgust? He never did anything to them, and yet they still accused him of doing all these nasty things to them and all of Konoha. Why do you all do this to me? What did I do? Please tell me. I don't ever remember doing anything to you, but if I did, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Please don't hurt me anymore. Naruto's voice was raspy and almost silent. The pain was clearly evident in the way he spoke. His innocent questions brought a smile to all 4 of their faces. Was the little demon expecting mercy after what he did to them? Ha! You honestly expect us to believe that? As for what you did, you know damn well, monster. You are foolish to think that we would fall for such a story. Now die, fox. The 3rd man stepped forward and held his hand to his mouth, but before he used his jutsu, Ino's mother stepped forward and held him in place. Wait. We can't kill him yet. He still hasn't suffered enough yet. Even though we could never inflict the amount of pain he did to us, we can still get close. Grinning viciously at him, she knelt down, still holding his hand down with her foot. She took her own kunai out and placed it near his chest. Then, despite his attempted struggles and cries of pain, she quickly drew deep cuts into his chest, watching in what looked akin to pleasure. His blood ran from the deep wounds. She continued her inhuman punishment until a small, but still loud and hurt voice made her stop. Mother. What are you doing to him? Let him go. It was an accident. Why won't you listen and why are you for hurting Naruto? A very pained and horrified Ino stooped about 10 meters away, holding a tree for support as she tried to process what she had just seen. Her mother was cutting Naruto and smiling. Before she could run to them and try to help Naruto, however, her mother quickly grabbed her and began running home. Before she left, however, she called back to the 3 men behind her, issuing a last order. You 3 hurry up and kill that fox. By now at least one of the nearby Anbu has heard the little demon's screams. That comment hit home for Ino, and tears began to fall even faster than before. Her mother, the woman who was her model in life and the one she loved so much, ordered the death of a little boy who had done nothing wrong. Naruto's consciousness began to slip as the pain finally began to override his thoughts. However, one thought whirled around both his and Ino's mind as his last bit of strength left his body. Why? Ino's tears were hazing her vision, but to her horror, she could still see the 3rd man standing in front of Naruto take in a deep breath, then complete his jutsu by exhaling fire. Fire style. Fireball jutsu. These were the last words Naruto heard before his entire world went black. Ino buried her head into her mother's shoulders as the sight before her made her sick to her very soul. The same question still in her mind. Why? 3 hours later, Hinata Hyuga was beautiful, little girl with pupil-less lavender eyes, dark blue hair, and pure white skin. She was truly fitting of her role as the heiress of the Hyuga clan. However, unlike most Hyuga, Hinata was a very kind and gentle soul who would rather hurt herself than another. This was all well and good, but her incredible shyness kept her from really enjoying life as she could never make any friends. She feared their rejection and insults. The elders of the Hyuga clan worried and questioned about their heiress's ability to lead the clan, however they were reassured that this would fade as she grew up. Hitomi, Hinata's mother, figured that the best remedy to her shyness was to find some friends who accept her and were around her own age. Hitomi originally thought that her nephew Niji would be a great friend for her daughter, but sadly, he seemed too tight about his role as guardian and did not make a good playmate for her. Most of the other branch children were either a lot older or too scared to play with Hinata because she was in the main family. It was for this very reason that Hitomi had taken her daughter to the public park in the middle of Konoha. She had hoped that seeing different kids her age playing together would encourage Hinata to join in and maybe make some friends. This, unfortunately, did the complete opposite. Hinata was even more nervous than usual. She just sat next to her mother with a sad, lonely face playing with her fingers, which was her habit when she got nervous. Hinata really wanted to play with the other kids. She noticed 3 kids climbing along the play gym encouraging each other when they came to an obstacle. Hinata wanted to ask them if she could join them, but was worried that they would find her too cowardly because she didn't really like heights. She would freeze up if she were too high off the ground. Deciding that they wouldn't let her play, she turned her lavender eyes to the next group of kids. She saw a group of 5 kids jumping in a skipping rope with one of them at each end turning the rope. Hinata had never seen this game before, but by the look on all of their faces, they were indeed having the time of their lives. Before she could even think to build up her courage, however, she saw one of the kids trip on the rope and fall, causing all the other kids to stop for him. Hinata, figuring that she wouldn't be good enough to jump like that, decided against playing with them as she didn't want to interrupt their game by falling all the time. The last bunch of kids that she saw was all grouped in a circle and were slowly and carefully bouncing a super bouncy ball between them. The game looked simple enough and she saw them welcome a few other kids since they started their game. Thinking that she might have a chance, she began to gather her courage to go and face them. But fate was not on her side as one of the kids, obviously a show-off, thought it would be funny to see just how high he could send it. The ball, being a super bouncy ball, did not travel in the intended direction and flew off at high speeds into the nearby trees. Giving a small glare at the disruptor of their game, the children then quickly dispersed among the trees to find the ball. Feeling disheartened that the game had ended before she could even ask to join, Hinata gave a small sigh and lowered her head. Seeing Hinata's expression, Hitomi realized that her daughter actually thought about joining in with those kids. Quickly, an idea surfaced in her mind on a way to help her daughter. Hinata-chan, why don't you help them find their ball? I'm sure they would appreciate the extra help. Hitomi noticed the sudden positive change in her daughter's face, but it quickly reverted back to her normal, discouraged one. I don't know what I could do. If they can't find it, how could I? Hinata's lack of belief in her own ability was very evident in her voice as she spoke. It sounded so sweet and kind, but lacked any hint of self-belief and courage. Easily, my dear, all you have to do is use your Byakugan and find the ball. Hitomi knew that the Hyuga's bloodline limit could easily find the ball, but Hinata still didn't think she could do it. But I only just learned how to activate my Byakugan. I could never find it. I'm not good enough with it. Hinata began to slightly sob as she once again pondered her weakness. Hitomi placed a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder and tilted the girl's head up slightly with her thumb. You will never know unless you try. Why don't you give it a go? You might surprise yourself. Don't worry because I believe that you can do it. Not wanting to disappoint her mother, Hinata's small sob slowly ebbed away. She slowly gathered charka to her eyes and hands, proceeding with the necessary hand signs to activate her bloodline. She fully expected it to fail. She was rewarded for her efforts with her Byakugan activating and her sight changing to black and white, viewing almost 360 around her for about 5 meters. Slowly standing up with a small smile on her face, she tried to concentrate on the vast rush of information her mind was subjected to and tried to see around her. Changing your view from normal sight to panoramic vision can be very hard to get used to, especially for a little girl who wasn't even 5. Standing almost perfectly still, Hinata used her Byakugan to try and locate the ball. This was only the second time Hinata had used her Byakugan, so she did not find the task easy. To her, everything just seemed like blurs. The trees, bushes and other children were not aiding her search. Suddenly, she noticed something in her field of vision that was not any of the other things. Thinking she had discovered the ball, she yelled out that she had found it. This gained everyone's attention, which in turn caused Hinata to blush a deep red. While the kids around her slowly approached to find out where their ball was, she focused her gaze on the strange object and its figure began to slowly take shape. She cringed when she realized it wasn't the ball. It's not the ball, I think it's a fox. Most of the children that had gathered around her left to continue their search, but a few remained, obviously wanting to see the fox. Not wanting to disappoint the remaining kids, Hinata began to lead them to the fox and was followed closely by her mother, who was quite proud that her daughter had found something, albeit a hazy something, about 10 to 15 meters away through brush on her second use of the Byakugan. As the kids slowly approached the area Hinata was leading them to, her vision became clearer. As she became closer and she could make out the fox a little better. She let out a loud gasp and everyone turned their attention back to Hinata, who seemed to be shaking slightly. What is it, Hinata? What do you see? Concern was clearly evident in Hitomi's voice, as she had rarely seen her daughter nervous enough to shake. It's the fox, it is hurt and badly, I can see its blood. Concern for the little fox quickly overwhelmed her nervousness and she ran through the remaining bushes into a small burnt clearing where the little fox lay. The sight she saw before her made her lose control of her Byakugan and it deactivated. She saw not a fox, but a small boy with blonde hair and 2 fox ears and a tail, wearing dark brown rags that had been severely burnt. His right hand and tail had been impaled by a katana and a kunai, and his flesh was a dark black and peeling, evidence of severe burns. But, the most disturbing sight of it all was the blood. A bloody puddle of about 1.5 meters in diameter surrounded the small boy. Beginning to faint from the horrible sight, the last thing Hinata saw was her mother lifting her up. "Well, what is this?" Hitomi almost screamed as she saw the sight before her. Tucking her daughter into her arms to hide her away from the sight, she quickly stepped forward to identify who or what the corpse was of. She looked over the little boy's burned body and slowly recognized who it was. This is Naruto. The pure shock and disbelief in her voice echoed around the clearing and a few of the children who she had told to stay behind for a second began to slowly emerge. Many of the children quickly turned away from the horrifying sight before them and ran away crying, some even vomited. But a few remained and those who remained began to laugh. To say Hitomi was surprised by their reaction would be a major understatement. She turned her eyes in disbelief to see a few children, some no older than 4, laughing at this poor boy. A flicker of anger arose in Hitomi and her Byakugan quickly activated. Like a flash she appeared behind the children and glared down upon them, startling the kids and almost making some of them shit themselves as they gazed up into Hitomi's furious eyes. "Why do you find this funny? This poor boy was murdered and you laugh at him. What sort of children are you?" Hitomi's fury quickly silenced the children before them, but one little upstart just smirked. "What's wrong with you, lady? We should be celebrating now that the monster is dead. My parents are always telling me on how bad this little monster is and how much they love to punish him for his crimes. They always said it was about time that the little demon paid for his crimes, so why aren't you happy?" Hitomi just stared at the boy who had spoken to her. Had she heard him right? Did he actually think it was something to celebrate about? A thought then hit her like a ton of lightning bolts. This is why no one ever heard of Naruto recently. People had been attempting their revenge on the fox. They probably thought Naruto was the fox. Their anger and hatred towards him had obviously rubbed off on their children. Hitomi began to cry as she thought about how terrible little Naruto's life must have been. She could almost imagine all the adults accusing him of things and hurting him for almost no reason. He would have felt true loneliness, no one to love him and no one to love as everyone around him hated him for just existing. No person deserved this treatment, let alone an orphan child who in Hitomi's mind was their savior, not their destroyer. Hitomi was brought out of her thoughts when she saw one of the children throw a rock at the corpse in front of them. "Leave him alone." Hitomi's voice was seldom ever raised, but when it was, many of the males in the Hyuga compound would almost shit themselves. So for little children, this was more than enough to make them run back home crying. Utter disgust and anger was more than present in her voice. Now that the horrible children were gone, Hitomi turned her gaze back to the corpse in front of her. As she walked towards it, however, she noticed that where the rock had struck the small boy's burnt face, a small chunk of burnt skin had fallen off, revealing almost perfectly healed skin underneath. With a small glimmer of hope, Hitomi rushed to the little boy's side, still holding her unconscious daughter. Brushing a small amount of burnt skin off his neck again revealed healed skin underneath. Amazed by his curative rate, she checked for a pulse. Her heart almost forgot how to beat when she felt that he was still alive, quite alive, if the level of his pulse was any measure. Pulling out a small cloth from under her kimono, she proceeded to clean the little Hanyou, carefully brushing off the dead burnt skin and gently rubbing any areas that were dirty. After about 20 minutes, she leant over to where the katana was still piercing his arm and carefully removed it. Seeing his blood flow from the wound quickly prompted her to tear some cloth and wrap his arm tightly. She did the same procedure with his tail. Feeling that it was broken, she used a small stick as a splint. After she had bandaged the wound, she felt her daughter begin to stir. Mommy H, how's the little fox boy?" Hinata's voice sounded even softer than usual. She always had had a kinda considerate heart, and seeing Naruto in such a state must have more than upset her. He's very injured with many broken bones and burnt skin, but he seems to be healing at an unprecedented rate. He might actually survive. But we need to help get him back to the Hyuga hospital, so I'll need you to walk on your own if you can so I can carry him. Seeing her daughter's eyes light up with hope and happiness almost brought a tear to her eyes. Hinata really did care about everything and everyone. Hinata hopped out of her mother's arms and turned to look at Naruto. She gasped again, but not from seeing him in such a gruesome state as before, but because she could see that he had mostly healed from the burns. With almost all the burnt skin and grime cleared off his body, he looked peaceful but at the same time lonely. She looked over his features and became curious about why he had fox ears, a tail, claws and whisker-looking marks on his cheeks, but she probably wouldn't have the time to ask him for a while. He had long blonde hair that was everywhere at the same time and reached down past his shoulders. His face was quite round and still had the look of a baby. His body was fairly bony and looked like he hadn't eaten in a week, which was almost true. She found herself wondering what sort of eyes he would have. Hitomi gently picked Naruto up and placed a hand under his tail, careful as to not agitate the broken bones. Standing up, she cradled him in her arms. A smile appeared on the boy's face, and Hitomi found herself wondering if Naruto was aware of her or if it was just the motherly hold that gave him peace. Then, as quickly and as gentle as she could, Hitomi walked back to the Hyuga compound, with a still slightly upset Hinata following close behind. Avoiding the villagers on the way to the Hyuga compound was not easy, and a few times she had to take a side street to avoid contact. She wasn't really sure on how badly Naruto was treated by the villagers, but judging from his earlier state, she assumed that most if not the entire village despised him. Therefore, she decided to play it safe and avoid them. Upon reaching the outer gates of the Hyuga compound, Hitomi picked up her pace a little and within a few minutes was just outside the hospital. Without even bothering to give the guards an explanation as to why she was carrying a bloodied Hanyou, she burst through the hospital doors and demanded that a doctor come to her at once. Recognizing the woman before them as the matriarch of the main branch of the Hyuga, the nurse quickly scurried away to grab an available doctor. She returned with a branch member who had a long white lab coat, dark black hair and amazingly, glasses. The Byakugan was the prize of the Hyuga clan and they valued their sight beyond almost everything. To see a Hyuga who needed glasses was a pitiable sight. They often lived their lives as outcasts. In contrast, to see one as a respected doctor was a great testament to his ability. Hitomi was hoping for this, as it was always so hard to find a competent doctor ever since Lady Tsunade had left the village. The doctor gave a disapproving look at the boy in Hitomi's arms. He knew of Naruto and didn't really want to help him, for he too thought little of the demon, but the glare Hitomi sent him silenced any protests he was about to make. The nurse and doctor led Hitomi to a small empty ward, then proceeded to ask what the problem was. Hitomi looked at them like they had grown a second head. Are you kidding me? I'm holding a half-burnt and bloody child in my arms, and you ask me what is the problem? He was barely alive when I found him, his whole body was completely burned and he had a kunai through his tail and a katana through his right arm. He also has multiple deep slash wounds along his chest. Now, I have given you the diagnosis so your job is easy. Help him. Few of the Hyuga had ever seen a main branch member, let alone a matriarch, ever let their emotions show to the point of yelling in anger, so they were quite shocked, that is until Hitomi gently lay Naruto down on a hospital bed and tapped her foot waiting for them to begin. Yes Hitomi-sama, we shall begin his treatment immediately. but I will have to ask you to wait outside." Hitomi looked at the doctor and nurse and nodded her head. "I will wait outside, but I will be watching. I don't believe you two like this poor child any more than the villagers. Come on Hinata-chan, we must let the doctors do their job." Gently holding her daughter by her hand, she walked out of the ward and sat outside the door with her Byakugan activated, steadily watching the doctors. Hinata was silently wishing for the poor, little fox boy to get better. About 2 hours later, a slightly tired doctor and nurse emerged from the ward with grim smiles on their face. Hitomi expected the worst. "What happened? Is he okay?" Hitomi asked with concern. The doctor and nurse's face then conveyed their shock and amazement. "He will live, but I have no idea how. His injuries were healing themselves at a rapid rate, but we could still tell the damage that had originally been done to him. I didn't realize that the village could be so cruel. The wounds he had, the broken eye, I have done everything I could. He was severely damaged originally, but his wounds have mostly healed. But I'm not sure a 5-year-old child could survive that physically, much less mentally. By all accounts he should be dead. It must be because of it." Hitomi's face frowned at the mention of the burden sealed inside of the poor boy. By the look in the doctor's eyes, he didn't really hate the boy, but he didn't particularly like him either. What she did see was disgust at the villagers. She doubted it was for whom they targeted, just more of what they did. No human being should be able to cause harm to a child like that, regardless of whether they thought he was a demon. So how long will it be before he wakes up? At this, Hinata looked up at the doctor for the first time since arriving. She also wanted to know when the little fox boy would be alright. "Well, I can't exactly say. My best guess is when his mind pieces itself back together from the trauma of the assault, which could be anywhere from a few months to a few years to never. All I do know is it won't be anytime soon. Now, normally I would say it would be best for him to not have any visitors, but considering his body is almost physically at 100%, I will allow it." The doctor and nurse then proceeded to give a slight bow and return to their duties. Hitomi could have sworn that she saw a slight tear in the nurse's eye as she left. By the look on her face, it was from the injuries they must have discovered on the boy's body. No child should have ever received that amount of punishment, especially if they were innocent. She was brought out of her thoughts when she felt her daughter tug on her sleeves. Mommy, can I see the little fox boy, please?" Hitomi looked down at her daughter and saw the pain in her eyes from seeing the boy in such a state. Hinata always hated to see anything hurt, so seeing Naruto in such a state must have more than upset her. "His name is Naruto, dear, and yes, you may." Hitomi grabbed onto her daughter's hand and led her back into the ward. "Please be okay." Naruto was all Hinata had on her mind as she entered the ward. Chapter 2. The Awakening. 1 week later, the week after Naruto was brought to the Hyuga hospital, Hitomi was again listening to her husband ramble on about how the elders of the clan and the council members were making his life difficult. She often found it funny to watch him as he vented his anger, because he would sometimes resemble a small child chucking a tantrum. And then they decided that the Branch family was receiving too many missions recently and tried to force my brother to decline 30% of the missions or give them a huge percentage of the money they make, and all this after what they decided to add to the Branch last week. I swear one of these days the elders are going to have some huge problems with the Branch family. The Ashi fell down in a slouch on his office chair and raised his head, expecting his wife to try and say something to make him feel better like she always did. However, as he looked into her lavender eyes, he realized that she wasn't really paying attention and seemed to be deep in thought. Calling out her name snapped her out of her trance and she apologized for phasing out. I'm just worried about Naruto. It's been 1 week and his wounds have healed, but he is still in a coma. I'm just worried that he might never wake up, and so is Hinata-chan. Do you think he will wake up? Have you visited him, Hiashi-kun?" The Ashi turned his head away from his wife. In truth, he really didn't want to talk about the little Hanyou in the Hyuga hospital, but his wife was worried about him, and so was his daughter. He himself didn't know what to think yet. He had heard stories about the boy, and they worried him. Although he never believed them fully, there still might have been some truth in them. He also did not believe the injuries the child was reported to have, even though they were told to him from his wife's mouth. He still did not believe that a child could survive that amount of physical punishment, regardless of whether he held the 9-tailed fox in him or not. "No, I have not visited him, nor do I plan to. I still do not even know why you brought him to the Hyuga hospital. Any regular hospital should have been suffice. As to when he will wake up, I have no idea as I am not a doctor." Hiashi's response earned him a glare from his wife. To her, his comment made him sound a little too like the other villagers. "And why not, Hiashi-kun? He is your best friend, son. How could you be so heartless to be like all the other villagers? What has he ever done?" This time it was Hiashi's turn to glare. "Do not compare me to those disrespectful villagers. I do not think Naruto is the fox, nor do I think he is himself. When he wakes up, however, I shall observe him closely. It will be easy to make sure if he is under any influence from the fox with my Byakugan. Only then will I decide what I think about the boy." Despite how much her husband had annoyed her just now, he was still willing to give him a chance, unlike all the idiot villagers, so that was enough for her. Oh, and one more thing about the council, they have heard of Naruto's assault and just claimed that he provoked them. They have also heard that you saved him from dying in the park and brought him to the Hyuga hospital. They want him gone, or they will threaten to charge you while protecting a criminal. This really hit a point on Hitomi, and she stood up in fury. How dare they? He is not the criminal, they are for allow this all to happen to Hitomi was cut short from her rage as they heard a branch member knock on Hiyashi's office door. Come in. Although Hitomi had regained her composure, you could still feel her fury. A moment later, the same doctor who had been treating Naruto slowly walked in and bowed low. Excuse me, Hiyashi-sama, Hitomi-sama. But I thought that you would want to know that Naruto's brain activity has picked up tremendously. As hard as it is to believe it, I think that his mind has repaired as best it can, and he might wake up from his coma very soon. He slowly raised his head and saw that Hitomi was barely containing her happiness, but Hiyashi however seemed as emotionless as ever. He's waking up. That is great news, take me to him immediately. Hiyashi, regardless of your feelings, I do believe that should at least wait outside his ward in case you do wish to see him. Rushing out of her husband's office, she was practically dragging the branch doctor with her the whole way. Halfway to the hospital, she saw her daughter trying to talk to the other children of the Hyuga. Most of them were wary of talking to her however, and she was looking slightly upset with their dismissal of her. Hinata-chan. Quickly come with me, Naruto is waking up. Hitomi called to her daughter, which had an instant response. Hinata quickly said goodbye to the children around her and apologized for leaving them, then quickly ran to catch up to her still running mother, who was still dragging the poor doctor. Upon reaching Naruto's ward, Hitomi stopped running and breathed deeply, both to prepare herself and to catch her second wind. Hinata was getting excited at the thought of Naruto finally waking up, however she also started to get a little nervous and began to hold on to her mother's dress for support and to hide behind quickly if the need arose. The doctor gave a short bow and said that if Naruto wakes up they are to tell him immediately. Thanking the doctor for his help, Hitomi then proceeded into Naruto's ward with her daughter close behind. They saw the little boy laying in the hospital bed asleep soundly, his old rags long since gone and replaced with the usual hospital cloths, although they were a little too big for him. Hitomi noticed that Naruto's facial expressions were changing quickly, but they didn't look happy. His face would screw up as if in pain for a few seconds, then relax, only to screw up again. Hitomi knew that he was having nightmares, and considering what happened a week ago, she wouldn't be surprised if she knew what they were about. In Naruto's mindscape, Naruto found himself running in what seemed like a vast underground sewer system. He didn't remember how he got there, nor did he know where exactly it was. All he knew was that he really wanted to get out. Every time he would run down a corridor he would remember some horrible event that had happened to him in the past. He couldn't remember how long he had spent down in the sewer, as there was barely ever any light to tell whether it was night or day. He ran down a new corridor he had found, but instead of finding the way out, he was rewarded with another painful memory. Flashback, Naruto was slowly walking through another street of the village trying desperately to find the old man Hokage. He had asked a few villagers that had passed him, but they either completely ignored him or shoved him out of the way, calling him names. Deciding to walk on the side path instead of in the middle of the road, Naruto's nose picked up the most delicious scent he had ever smelt. According to the smell, it was large chicken cuts cooked in a cheese and shiitake mushroom sauce, all placed on a plate of fried udon noodles. Naruto's mouth began to drool and his stomach growled loudly, but he realized that the food was not for him, it never was. Despite this though, he was curious as to where the smell came from. Following his nose, he soon came across a fancy restaurant with a large sign out the front containing today's specials. As Naruto began to read the list, a tall man in a black suit, who had just finished serving another customer, walked out the front to greet the next person in line. As he was about to take a new couple into the restaurant however, he noticed a small boy reading the special sign. On closer inspection he noticed who the boy was. Politely excusing himself from the couple he was serving, he walked over to the boy with a look of pure disgust on his face. "Get away from here. We don't serve your kind, so get lost." Naruto spun around to see who had addressed him and wished he hadn't. Because as soon as Naruto had turned around he felt pain rush through his face and head as the waiter kicked him hard. Naruto flew a few meters back and covered his now broken nose with his hands, crying in pain. The man just looked at the bleeding child in front of him with a small amount of satisfaction. "Let that be a warning for you to stay away, monster." Naruto began to fall over from the pain, and as he entered unconsciousness, the memory faded. Flashback end. Naruto slowly stood up as he recovered from the horrible memory. Why? Why did they always treat him like this? In all of his memories, people always hated him and despised him for nothing. In all the memories, they all just looked at him with an icy stare and refused to treat him with anything that resembles kindness. He was distracted from his thoughts when he saw a small flicker of light at the end of another corridor, this being the first sign of light. Naruto quickly ran towards it, in hopes that it was a way out of this horrible sewer. Upon reaching the light, Naruto saw that it was a small glass ball floating in midair. Curious as to what it was doing there, Naruto reached up and grabbed the ball, pulling it close to him. When the ball was close enough, Naruto could recognize two figures playing within the ball. To his shock, it was himself and that girl Ino. Naruto smiled at the memory as he really did enjoy playing with a little girl. However, his smile soon faded when he recalled what happened next. He had accidentally scratched her shoulder, which her mother had seen. The glass ball, upon Naruto remembering that part of the memory, turned a bright blood red, and Naruto saw himself being yelled at by Ino's mother. Flashback: "You hurt my daughter, you little monster. How dare you touch her?" Ino's mother, while clutching the little Hanyou in her hand, lifted him higher and slammed a fist into his face, sending him flying through the air and hitting a tree hard. Naruto winced as he watched himself getting punched like that, looking at it from his angle. Now he must have flown back at least 10 meters. Naruto then watched as the three men ran after him with the intent to kill him. Naruto watched as they stabbed him with a katana, though his right arm, then a kunai through his little tail. He watched with teary eyes as Ino's mother cut deep into his chest, drawing huge quantities of blood from his body. He saw himself look up to them, asking them why he deserved their hatred when he never did anything to them. Why did they always hurt him? Only to see one man step forward and give him the same reply everyone else gave him. "Ha! You honestly expect us to believe that? As for what you did, you know damn well, monster. You are foolish to think that we would fall for such a story. Now die, fox." Naruto turned away from the glass ball and released it from his hold. Flashback end. He didn't know why they treated him like that. No matter how many times he sat and wondered, he could never figure it out. He sat down in the murky water and began to cry. He cried for the pain he suffered and horrible memories he had endured. He cried for his lack of understanding of why they hated him, but what he mostly cried for was the utter loneliness he was feeling. Trapped in this strange sewer, Naruto figured he would never make a real friend, and it was probably better this way anyway, because who could ever want to be a friend with a monster? Then it hit him, like 1,000 needles made of ice. Am I really a monster? Is that why they hate me? I'm a monster. Finding no other reason to counter his thoughts, Naruto once again began to cry. They hurt him because he was a fox monster and there was nothing that he could do about it. Maybe that's why he was an orphan. Maybe his parents thought that he was a monster too. Hating him like the rest of the village, they maybe just put him in the orphanage and forgot about him. He was pulled from his dark thoughts as he heard a low growling in the distance down one of the furthest corridors that was visible. Curious as to what was there and figuring that it would probably be something that could eat him and save the villagers from the monster, he slowly stood up and walked towards the growling. As he neared the corridor, the growling got significantly louder and small amounts of red gas-looking substance was slowly flowing out of the corridor. Peering around the corner, Naruto looked down the long corridor filled with red gas. He could not see anything, however, so he decided to walk down it. What harm could it do? He was probably going to die of starvation in this horrible sewer anyway. But before he moved, a bright white light came from the far end of the sewer, and an incredible strong gale soon began to pull at everything around it, including Naruto. Fearful of what the light was doing, Naruto grasped onto a small pipe next to him and held on for his dear life, hoping that the vortex would be over soon. However, the wind just picked up its pace, and Naruto felt his fingers begin to release their hold on the pipe, so as a last desperate attempt, he dug his nails deep into the pipe. However, even with his new hold, the wind was still proving stronger as Naruto felt his claws ripping right through the metal as he was pulled towards the vortex. He would never let go. He didn't want to be sucked into some strange vortex, that is, until he heard a deep and booming voice come from the corridor in front of him. "Let go, you need to wake up and now." The voice gave a large roar as it finished, which blasted Naruto from the pipe and towards the vortex. Swirling and spinning in the powerful gale, Naruto saw the vortex fast approach, or rather him approach the vortex. But as he connected with the vast expanse of white light, he felt that he had hit something solid and passed right through, feeling no pain at all. Naruto didn't realize that he was actually being pulled out of his subconscious by the voice of a small girl and her mother who were calling to him. Hitomi and Hinata had been calling out softly to Naruto for the last 15 minutes as he was violently thrashing around, obviously having a terrible nightmare. They were rewarded for their efforts when his body stopped shaking and his ears twitched slightly, followed by his eyes slowly opening. Naruto opened his eyes slowly and allowed for them to adjust slightly to the rush of light. This new place was definitely brighter than the sewer. As his eyes were once again able to focus, even if only a little, he looked around the room he was in. At first glance it looked like just a white room with nothing in it, but as his eyes focused a little better, he was able to see a little more. He saw that he was in a small white bed with railings and white sheets. He also felt that he wore different cloths and assumed that the cloths were also white. If anything in the room that he saw could vouch for that. He then heard some movement next to him and flicked his eyes to the right as he heard a voice speak to him. "Naruto-kun, are you alright?" Naruto almost jumped out of his skin as he didn't think there was anyone in the room with him. Slowly sitting up he turned to look at who had addressed him. This was quite the job as his muscles were very tight. He saw that the person who had spoke to him was standing right next to the bed he was in, however, because his vision was still blurry, he could not make out the figure properly. Of what he could see, she was tall and slender with dark blue hair and seemed to carry an air of nobility around her. Naruto, mistaking her for an angel, fell into deep depression. So they did kill me after all, but why am I in heaven? I thought that monsters go to hell. Looking up to the figure in front of him, he thought he might as well confirm it. Are you an angel? Am I dead and in heaven? Naruto's voice was quiet and full of sadness. It almost brought a tear to Hitomi's eyes that he thought that he was dead. No, Naruto-kun, I am not an angel, nor are you dead. You are in the Hyuga hospital. My name is Hitomi, and I am the matriarch of the Hyuga clan. Hitomi, who expected a full array of questions from the young Hanyou, was caught off guard when she saw his reaction. Naruto had trouble understanding the woman in front of him as he was feeling a little dizzy. Why did she call me Naruto? No one calls me that except old man Hokage, and how am I still alive? Who would want to save a monster like me? Then another thought hit him like a ton of bricks. The woman in front of him said she was the matriarch of the Hyuga clan. Naruto had heard about them. They were like the nobility of Konoha, and they would never tolerate someone like him. They would hate him, especially for using their hospital. Rubbing his eyes so he could see better, he looked at the woman to confirm his fears, and seeing her pupilless lavender eyes proved just that. Jumping out of the hospital bed sheets, he bent down low and arched his back down, while placing his tail between his legs and flattening his ears. Though he had no idea why he did this, to him it seemed natural, almost like an instinct. He began to whimper slightly because of the fright of being beat again. Maybe if he was lucky they would think him too below them to worry about and not beat him. They were nobility after all, and he was only a monster. Hitomi looked on in shock as she saw what Naruto was doing. He looks like an animal who is submitting to a leader, and he is shaking in fear. Oh Naruto, you poor child, what have they done to you? Well, Hitomi was caught off guard by his animalistic behavior in showing that he was less than them. She was almost knocked off her feet when he spoke to her. Please Hyuga-sama, please don't hurt me. I'm sorry for what I did. I don't know why I'm here, but I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to be. Please don't hit me. I'm sorry. I'm a monster. I'll run away and you will never hear from me again. I promise. Naruto's voice alone was enough, almost bring Hitomi to tears, but what really shocked her was his referral to himself. He called himself a monster. Oh, what have they done to you, Naruto? Lifting her face to look him dead in the eyes, she saw that he was tearing up while slowly taking submissive steps back, all the time placing his head low. She walked next to the bed and held out her hand slowly to his face. Naruto froze up thinking she was about to hit him, and his shaking started to show even more. The next thing he knew, however, he was lifted gently in the air by his armpits and pulled closer to her while she wrapped her arms around him. Thinking she was going to crush him, he became even more still, waiting for the enviable pain that would soon follow. He was shocked, however, when she just held him gently in her arms while rocking him slowly back and forth and resting her head on his shoulder and whispering gentle words into his ears. Naruto never remembered anyone ever doing this to him. He could feel the warmth on her body, he could feel her soft face against his while saying comforting things to him. It created a warmth within him that made him feel safe. Combined with her warmth and gentle hold, the whole thing felt like nothing he had even had before. It felt nice, and he liked it. Naruto feeling safer than ever before, and another feeling he had only felt a few times. He felt happy. Maybe this is what it feels like to have friends and someone who cares for you. The whole thing was just too much for little Naruto, and he felt all his bottled up sadness almost flush away like a river as his tears began to flow from his heavy eyes. Hitomi, deeply saddened by Naruto's reaction to such a small show of affection, began to cry along with him, all the while still whispering comforting words in his ears. She held him like this for about 20 minutes until his tears slowly ebbed away and only small sniffles remained. Naruto looked up at the woman who had shown him his first experience of affection since the old man visited him in the orphanage, his eyes still red from fresh tears. Thank you Hyuga-sama for this, I don't know what it is, but it was nice, thank you. Hitomi gave the little Hanyou in her arms a warm smile, but that soon disappeared when he next spoke. I must go now, thank you for your kindness to me. I wish everyone in the village was as nice and pretty as you. I will go now. I need to leave so that the villagers don't hate you too, and I need to find the person who saved me. Do you know where they are? Call me Hitomi, and you don't have to leave, Naruto. You are allowed to stay here as long as you want. Oh, and I don't ever want to hear you say that you are a monster, because you aren't. You're Naruto Uzumaki of the Leaf. Promise you won't. Hitomi gave another warm smile, and Naruto had to pinch his tail because he thought he was dreaming, then slowly nodded. And you don't have to worry about looking far for the one who saved you, she's right here. If anyone is an angel, then she is. Looking around for her daughter, Hitomi gave a small sigh, thinking her daughter had been too nervous and upset that she had left. Naruto, however, lifted his head and began sniffing the air. Is there someone else here? I think I can smell another person here, but they have almost the same scent as you. Hitomi was shocked that he could smell that well and found herself almost not believing him. That is until she remembered about his bloodline, then what he said actually hit her. Slowly putting him back on the bed, she looked around for her daughter. She looked for about 2 minutes until Naruto spoke up. Hitomi-sama, who is that hanging onto your dress? Hitomi looked behind her and saw a very nervous Hinata latched onto her dress. Gently pulling her free, she placed her next to Naruto's bed and began the introductions. Naruto found it a little odd that she was hiding like that, but not being one to judge as he himself hated being judged. Just-san is fine, Naruto-kun, when we are not in public or around other Hyugas. Anyway, this Naruto-kun is my beautiful daughter Hinata-chan, the one who found you and in turn saved your life, so she is the angel. Hinata blushed a deep red at her mother's introduction and began playing with her fingers, with her head held low to hide her embarrassment. Naruto, wanting to be friendly as possible, jumped down off the bed, landing on all fours. Standing up slowly, he introduced himself happily while wagging his tail. Hello Hinata-sama, my name is Naruto Uzumaki and thanks for saving my life, it was the nicest thing anyone has ever done for me. Naruto bowed very low, which caused his little ears to point directly at Hinata, who was still blushing like crazy. Curious as to what his ears felt like, Hinata gathered her courage just enough to have a gentle rub. Naruto jumped back from the sudden touch, but quickly realized that she didn't mean him any harm. I'm sorry Naruto-san, I didn't mean to. I'm sorry. Hinata's voice was soft and caring, although by the sound of it, she thought that she had done something wrong. Naruto, regaining his posture, walked towards the girl who saved him and slightly lowered his head and moved his tail in front of him. It's okay Hinata-sama, you just startled me. I'm not used to people wanting to touch me nicely. So if you want to, you can touch my ears and tail. I think a lot of other kids find them cool because they also like to touch them. After a few seconds, Hinata stepped slowly forward and brought her hand to his head. Gently, she began to rub them with her fingers. They felt soft, almost like small furry silk. As Hinata continued to pet Naruto, Hitomi noticed a change in Naruto's stance. He seemed more relaxed and far less tense. Then, to both her and Hinata's surprise, Naruto made a very low and peaceful growl in the back of his throat, which almost sounded like he was humming. Hinata, thinking she did something wrong, quickly removed her hand and took a step back and grabbed hold of her mother's dress again. Naruto's ears gave a quick flick in several directions from the sudden lack of attention, and Naruto raised his head. That felt kind of nice Hinata-sama, thank you. Naruto said with a smile. He then once again stood straight and returned his tail behind him, which slowly moved left to right. Oh, I thought that I hurt you, Naruto-san, you don't have to call me Sama either if you don't want. Hinata suddenly began even more nervous, if that was possible, and lowered her head again. Naruto-san, if you don't mind me asking. Why do you have foxy ears and a tail? Hinata expected Naruto to either yell at her or get embarrassed by her asking such a personal question. But to her surprise, when she finally lifted her head, Naruto was smiling at her instead. Well, that's the awesome part, you see, according to the old man, I am the last from a clan who possessed a Kekkei Genkai that allowed them to take on some of the appearance and attributes of an animal. Mine just happened to be a fox. Which is cool because I like foxes, I don't know why, I just do. Anyway, because of my Kekkei Genkai, I am able to hear really well with my ears, I have an awesome sense of smell, and I have this here tail. Naruto proclaimed, point to each piece of his body as he spoke. To Hitomi, Naruto right now resembled the little kid he should have been allowed to be. He also seemed quite proud of his fox features, even if they do get him in trouble, or maybe it was because he thinks that his parents were like him. So Hinata-san, now that I've shown you my Kekkei Genkai, I've heard that the Hyuga have one too, so I was wondering if I can see yours. Hinata blushed deep red again, but not from embarrassment, but from someone actually wanting her to show them something. She had never done that before, as no one really wanted to talk to her, and therefore she found it difficult on what to do. She was very confused. Hitomi, however, had a hard time not laughing from the classic "I'll show you mine if you show me yours" scene. Go on dear, show Naruto your Byakugan, it's alright, nothing bad will happen because of it. Hinata slowly edged forward towards Naruto and looked at him directly in the eyes. Gathering the necessary charka and performing the hand signs, Hinata attempted to activate her Byakugan. Byakugan. Hinata waited in anticipation, but when nothing happened and her Byakugan didn't activate, Hinata sighed dejectedly and began to cry slightly because to her, it felt like she failed once again. She felt both weak and embarrassed. Weak, because she wasn't strong enough to activate her Byakugan, even though she had done it twice before. Embarrassed, because Naruto really wanted to see her Byakugan and she failed. She began to cry a little harder and lowered her head in shame, but before Hitomi could encourage her and tell her that it was alright and she should try again, Naruto stepped forward and grabbed her gently by the hands. He then comfortingly moved his tail to her face and wiped the tears off, to which she gave a small leap in surprise. It's okay Hinata-san, try again. I've failed many things in my life, but I never give up and will always try again till I get it right. I believe you can it, so all you have to do is also believe that you can do it, so try again, okay? Naruto gave Hinata a big grin and she proceeded to blush from his faith in her and gave a small grin back. After her sniffling slowly ended, she then gave a slight nod, followed by a very quite okay. Hitomi marveled at not only by the fact that he just gave her a little courage, but also by what Naruto said. Anyone who was abused as much as he was shouldn't have a heart at all, let alone be that kind and understanding. She found herself smiling just like he was when Hinata retried activating her Byakugan, this time succeeding. I did it. Hinata gave a small yell of happiness as she once again activated her Byakugan, which was accompanied by Naruto, making a strange yip noise followed by a fist thrust up into the air. See, I told you could do it, Hinata-san. To Hitomi it looked like Naruto was almost as happy as Hinata about her Byakugan, if not more. Such a kind soul wasted on such a pathetic and ungrateful village. Naruto moved closely to Hinata and inspected her now changed eyes. He noted that not only had they changed to a bright white color, but she also now had pupils, even though they were also white, he could still see them. He also saw that the veins on the sides of her eyes were now very pronounced. Wow, Hinata. Your eyes are so cool. They are even prettier than before. Naruto gave another big smile and Hinata found herself feeling lightheaded. My eyes are pretty. Hinata seemed a little dazed and Naruto wondered if she was feeling sick. Gently nudging her with his tail seemed to snap her out of it and she gave a small grin and blushed as well as apologizing for her spacing out. Nah, it's okay, Hinata, I do it all the time. So what special ability does you Byakugan eyes give you, is that how you say it? Naruto tilted his head slightly and awaited a response, but this time instead of Hinata, Hitomi answered him. Mainly because her daughter still seemed a little out of it, maybe it was time for a rest after all this, as it seemed to be a little too much for her right now. Yes, you did say it correctly. As for what it does, Naruto-kun, the Byakugan has many special abilities, although not as physically visible as your Kekkei Genkai is, the Byakugan is still very powerful. Its first ability is that it provides us with an almost 360-degree vision around us, as well as telescopic vision which allows us to see over great distances. With it we can also see through any object, as long as it isn't constructed or reinforced with Charka. Which brings me to its next ability. With the Byakugan we are able to see Charka around us as well as within anything, which includes the Charka network. Utilizing these abilities we can combine them along with our fighting style, the Gentle Fist, to close off and shut down both organs and Charka points in any body. Effectively defeating an enemy without any exterior damage by completely destroying them from the inside. Hitomi finished her small lecture and turned to see a wide-eyed Naruto staring at her. I'm really sorry, Hitomi-san, but I didn't understand even half of that. You had a lot of big words, and Naruto was cut off however, and the hospital doors practically flew off their hinges as an extremely angry council member, a slightly ticked off Hiashi, and a calm as ever Niji walked into the ward. What is the meaning of this, Hitomi-sama? How dare you give away valuable Hyuga knowledge to this? Turning his gaze to Naruto, this monstrosity. This however didn't get the desired response as Hitomi just turned to him with a death glare and replied with a sickly sweet voice. Please leave, Hitaki-san, this is a private discussion between myself, my daughter and Naruto-kun. Oh, and if you refer to him as that again, I will have you sent to the branch family. Hitaki visibly paled at this and quickly turned around and walked out muttering an assortment of curses under his breath, which only Naruto heard. Upon hearing a few of them he frowned slightly. Hitomi-san, what does stuck-up whore mean? Hitomi turned her head to face him so fast that everyone around her thought that she might have snapped her neck. Asking him where he heard such a thing, he replied honestly. That angry guy Hitaki, was it? Yeah, he said it under his breath as he left the room. Naruto had no idea what it meant but quickly jumped back when he felt her anger rise to inhuman levels. Oh, he is so dead when I get my hands on him. Hiashi, fearing for the life of one of his advisors, closed the ward's doors and walked over to his wife to calm her down. Naruto found himself staring intently at the man, which seemed to be Hitomi's husband, if the way he calmed her down was proof to that. After releasing his now calmed down wife, Hiashi turned his gaze to Naruto. When Naruto met his eyes he froze, they were cold and uncaring, very similar to those he saw in the people who attack him. Backing down slowly and bending low to the ground like before, the fear he had when he woke returned. That is however until Hiashi's eyes changed. They were no longer cold and uncaring, but soft and full of love, similar to the eyes of his wife. Naruto relaxed somewhat but was still ready to run if Hiashi lunged at him. It's alright, Naruto-kun, I won't hurt you. I just have to keep a certain image up when around anyone other than my family. I'm sorry if I caused you distress just now. Naruto, relieved that he wasn't going to be attacked, stood up straight again and looked at the man with a smile. Hiashi returned the smile with a small one of his own, then turned to face Niji. Niji-kun, I want you to take Hinata-chan and Naruto-kun to the Hyuga Gardens and watch over them until we arrive there. Hitomi-chan and I need to talk about a few things. I also want you to get one of the servants to get some clothes for him to wear, as he can't go around wearing hospital cloths all day. Nodding his head slightly, Neji introduced himself to Naruto and led them out of the hospital towards the garden. After they left, Hiashi turned to his wife to see her grinning at him with an eyebrow raised. What? Hiashi asked, completely unaware of what she was smiling about. See, told you didn't I? He isn't the fox at all. I know you were watching from just outside, so when did you realize that he wasn't the fox? Hiashi returned her smile, now knowing on what she was talking about, but it quickly changed to a frown. No, he isn't the fox. I realized that when I saw the look in his eyes when he first woke up so frightened and afraid of you, and that you would hit him, and his reaction when you hugged him. I wish I have known about this sooner. I might have been able to do something. Damn those stupid villagers. Hitomi, feeling that her husband was getting a little too angry, held him tight for comfort. Well, he's here now, so therefore we can make up for all the lost time. But first, didn't you release him from hospital a little too soon? I mean, he just woke up an hour ago. Hiashi just smiled and handed her the latest doctor's report. According to this, he was 100% physically after about 3 days after he first came here. They just had to check how mentally stable he was after he woke up. After watching him and how he reacted to this, I believe that he is sane, just scared from what's happened to him so far. Those scars will heal in time, but I do believe that his behavior has been permanently changed because of it. How much I don't know, but I do know that it has. His animalistic submission and his admission that he believed he was a monster is proof of that. As for making up for lost time, that's what I came to talk about. The elders have made a few decisions that are best for the clan. The way Hiashi spoke the last sentence told her he was in his serious mode and proceeded to follow him out of the hospital to a more private section, away from prying ears and eyes. Chapter 3. A friend for life. Neji slowly led an excited Naruto and a nervous Hinata to the Hyuga Gardens. Naruto was now dressed in a pair of white pants and a blue t-shirt, which much to his joy was given to him to keep, his first gift. The servant who had helped him dress had to cut a hole in the back of his pants though, to provide a spot for his tail to go through. Upon passing through the last door out of the main house, Naruto's eyes went wide and his nose gave a slight twitch. It wasn't just the amazing view that stunned him, but also the onrush of scents. Naruto had a hard time sorting them all out, but luckily for him they were all nice smells. Naruto took slow steps out of the house and down the 3 steps to the garden, all the while looking quickly from side to side and trying to take in the view before him. The garden stretched for a good 3 acres, all masterfully crafted and set up into 4 distinct sections. The first section was what looked to be the picnic area. It was surrounded by flat-cut grass and had large trees with white and pink flowers above tables. It looked quite relaxing. The second section contained a few tables next to a 6-foot hedge maze. The maze was then surrounded by a square of cherry blossom trees. The third section looked to be more of the relaxation area, as it had small flat areas with low trees with white flowers and had a small river running through the middle of it into a rock pond. The pond was filled with all sorts of exotic fish and had a few lilies floating on its surface. It was also full of hedge statues of many different animals. The last section is what really caught Naruto's eyes. It was by far the largest section of the garden and had good reason to be, because the last section was what looked like a walk-through forest with wooden boardwalks trailing throughout it. The trees were huge and must have been many decades old, despite how much Naruto thought it would be fun to climb them. Something told him that it wouldn't be a good idea, they looked too well cared for to be scratched by his claws. The garden is what you would have expected for royalty, so Naruto wasn't too surprised, but he was anxious however to run around the whole place as fast as he could and see as much as possible. He turned to look at Hinata and Neji and asked if they wanted to play with him. He was really hoping they would because he loved to play, but every time he got the chance to play with kids his age, their parent always got between them. Neji was the first to reply as Hinata was still too nervous to answer. I am sorry Naruto-san, but my duty is just to look after Hinata-sama. I will watch you both from the porch. Naruto was slightly disheartened that Neji didn't want to play, but he quickly cheered up when Hinata agreed to. I will play W with you if you don't mind, Naruto-san, I promise I won't mess up. Hinata was extremely happy that someone wanted to play with her, but was still worried that Naruto would find her weird like all the other kids she knew. But instead of rejecting her, he gave a huge smile and jumped slightly and made another yip noise like she heard before. Alright. Let's go play, Hinata-san. Naruto grabbed Hinata by her hand, which made her give a slight blush at the contact, and gently pulled her along with him, while he ran looking for the nearest area where they could play some games. Neji just stood on the porch watching them both with a plain expression on his face. He was however wondering how it was possible for someone that just woke up from a coma could have that amount of energy. with Hitomi and Hiashi. So as you can tell, the council wants Naruto-kun out of the Hyuga complex as soon as possible, or they will proceed with their threats. They also have made a few attempts to overrule my authority and arranged for him be removed from the complex in other ways. So even though I don't like it, I believe that Naruto-kun should be taken to the Hokage before anything bad happens to him like last week before he came here. I'm not sure what the Hokage could possibly do, as the council has been making Naruto-kun's life difficult from the day he was born, but I'm sure that he could arrange a place for him to stay, as well as Anbu, to make sure he is left in peace. I just wish there was something we could do about it, but as I just told you what the elders threatened to do, I can't allow that to happen, even if we can't have Naruto-kun stay here. Hiashi finished his little explanation and turned to his wife, who was clearly upset, if the tears running down her face were any indication. I just think it's so unfair that he is treated this way. What has he ever done for them except save their miserable hides by keeping the fox sealed? What does he get for that? He gets abused and neglected, all because they think he is the fox because he is a Hanyou. Most of Konoha has never seen a Hanyou before Naruto, but we were all told the stories about them when the tailed demons were first hunted for their power. It seemed because of the lack of understanding of sealing back then often caused them to slightly merge with the demon they held, but Naruto-kun became a Hanyou because of the amount of demonic chakra his body had to deal with while the fox was being sealed. All the stories of Hanyous that we were told depicted them as kind and generous beings, and because of their power, they were able to help those in need. All this was explained by the Hokage, but no one listened, and then because they wouldn't listen, he had to declare that Naruto-kun's fox attributes as a bloodline to keep him safe. But even that didn't work, and now the elders wants Naruto to leave the first people who showed him kindness. He will never be able to see us again because of what they threatened. Hitomi's anger towards the council and sadness for what Naruto constantly endured was too much for her, and her tears increased. Hiashi held his wife close as she cried and spoke comforting words into her ear. After about 5 minutes, however, an idea came to his mind, to which he gave a small chuckle. Hitomi looked up to her husband with a look that screamed, "And what is funny about this? The council and the elders are banning Naruto-kun from visiting the Hyuga clan or staying with us, correct?" To which Hitomi nodded her head. Naruto-kun is in Uzumaki, and even though they originally came from Whirlpool country, the council would never admit to it because it would bring up questions about Naruto's other lineage. And the Uzumaki clan is extinct except for Naruto-kun, right? Making him the head of the Uzumaki clan. To which Hitomi nodded again, although this one was slightly more enthusiastic, showing her interest. Well then, we will just have to have regular clan head meetings between the Hyuga clan and the Uzumaki clan. They can't object to that, as it will be classed as an official meeting, not a visit. Hiashi gave a wide smile as his idea was met by heavy agreeability, courtesy of his wife's mouth on his. After about 20 minutes of making out with his wife, and just as it was getting interesting, Hiashi was rudely disturbed by a branch member knocking on his door. Signing quite loudly because of the interruption, Hiashi gently lifted his wife off him and opened the office door. "Forgive my intrusion, Hiashi-sama, but your brother Hisashi-sama has asked that you speak with him at once. He is waiting for you on the porch to the Hyuga Gardens. I believe he wishes to speak to you about the fox boy known as Naruto." The branch member finished his message with a low bow before dismissing himself. Hiashi and Hitomi straightened their cloths and fixed their slightly messed hair, then proceeded to head towards the Hyuga Gardens. With Naruto and Hinata. Naruto was currently running and leaping on all fours in a rush to get away from Hinata. They weren't currently playing any specific game, Hinata was just trying to catch Naruto by the tail. But it seemed that Naruto was just a little too fast for Hinata, because every time she got close to him, he would bounce away in another direction, just missing her grasp. That was until Naruto decided to try and wait until the last minute before jumping away, as he didn't expect anything to distract him from jumping away. So when his stomach decided to make a very loud rumble, he was temporarily distracted from the chase when his mind wandered to his empty stomach and Hinata grabbed him on his tail. Brought back out of his thoughts of food, he realized that Hinata had caught him. You got me, Hinata-san. I knew you could do it eventually." Naruto gave a big smile and congratulated Hinata on how quick she is to be able to catch him. Hinata proceeded to blush from the praise and lower her head slightly to hide her embarrassment. "It was only because why your stomach growled, it distracted why you. Are you hungry?" Hinata's voice was still quiet as she was still embarrassed, but the signs that she was concerned for him were evident in her voice. It was something that Naruto rarely ever got from anyone. She's concerned for me? That may be so, Hinata-san, but I still think that you are very fast. And yeah, I'm a little hungry, but it's okay. I'll find something to eat later." Usually when Naruto was hungry, he just went and found the nearest garbage can and looked for food scraps or tried to find a fruit tree and grab some fruit. So it was a little surprising when Hinata offered to get him some food from the Hyuga kitchen. He declined, of course, saying that he would find a fruit tree later and eat from it. Naruto-san, there is apple trees in the gardens, if you want I can get some help to get them for us. Hinata gently grabbed Naruto by his arm and led him into the picnic area of the Hyuga gardens and to the small grove of apple trees. Double-checking that it was okay for him to eat them and declining her offer to get someone to help, Naruto bent down low before jumping high and latching himself onto the tree with his clawed hands and feet. Hinata yelled for him to watch out because he would fall, but stopped her pleas when she noticed that he wasn't falling, to which she asked him why. Naruto turned to look at her and released his hold of one of his hands, flexing his claws. I can use my claws to hold me up, Hinata-san. It's really helpful and I love to climb trees. Now watch this, I'm gonna get us some apples. Naruto's enthusiasm made Hinata giggle slightly, he was kind of funny and he seemed enjoy making her laugh. She watched on in amazement as he again bent low and quickly crawled up the tree and lunged himself into the air, twisting a few times, then lashing out in several directions with his hands, almost as if he was clawing the air itself. But as he began to fall, Hinata noticed that 5 apples along the path that he jumped were also falling. And just as Naruto landed, so did the apples. Neji watched from his place on the porch in wonder of the ability and control Naruto had over his body, especially his claws. Because all 5 apples that landed were cut clean from the tree by their stalks. While Neji was trying to figure out how Naruto could do something like that, he failed to notice a man walk close up behind him and place a hand on his shoulder. Well, that maneuver was quite impressive. They look to be having a lot of fun, don't they, Neji-kun? Neji, although he jumped slightly at the unexpected contact, relaxed somewhat as he heard his father's voice and decided to ask his father a few things about Naruto. Yes, they do look to be having fun. That is, if the constant giggling and laughing coming from the 2 eating children could vouch for it. Neji's father Hisashi, however, was a little saddened by his son's response. He seemed way too fixated on his duty as Hinata's guardian for a child his age and rarely joined in the fun. But I do have a few questions, father. Why does Naruto-san both look and act like a fox? I have been watching him and the way he moves and bounces around and the sounds he makes all resemble movements of a fox. So why is he like that? Hisashi thought carefully on how to word his explanation to his son. He couldn't very well just say that it was his bloodline because that wouldn't make sense, but he also couldn't say it was because of the 9-tailed fox sealed within him. But after about 5 minutes he was able to answer his son. Well, Neji-kun, as you have probably heard already, Naruto-kun possesses a bloodline that gives him the attributes of an animal, his being a fox. Now that explains the fox ears and tail, as well as his longer than usual teeth and sharp claws. But as for his instincts on how to move as well as his movements themselves, I do believe that most of it is caused by his bloodline, as his muscles have obviously been changed because of his bloodline, which allows him to move on all 4s better, as well as make those odd yip noises of his. But it may also be because he was rarely shown any different and could have just let his primal way of thinking influence the way he does everything. Hisashi thought that his explanation was a little much for a 6-year-old, but Neji nodded his head and thanked his father, seeming to understand him. Hisashi and Neji turned back to the 2 children and watched Naruto peel Hinata's apple with his claws, much to her delight as she didn't really like the skin. Naruto, however, not being nearly as fussy, simply cut his apples in 4s and swallowed them, core and all. Hinata, never seeing someone eat an apple that fast, let alone the apple's core, stared at him wide-eyed as he did the same thing with the other 3 apples. Swallowing a total of 4 apples in under a minute. Naruto asked if she wanted some more apples but said she was fine, so he just sat next to her quietly waiting for her to finish. All the while swishing his tail back and forth, which caused Hinata to giggle whenever it touched her. Naruto liked having Hinata laugh, so seeing such a perfect opportunity, Naruto quickly jumped up and pounced on Hinata and pinned her down with his hands. Neji, thinking Naruto was about to attack his cousin, jumped up, a kunai already in his hand. He did think that Naruto was a little wild, but attacking Hinata was too far. He stopped dead in his tracks and looked back as his father put a hand on his shoulder, then pointed back to Hinata and Naruto. Looking back, he then noticed that Naruto was not attacking Hinata but tickling her with his tail, which made Hinata squeal out in laughter and try desperately to get away. After about a minute of non-stop laughing, Naruto decided it was best to leave her alone to catch her breath. Smiling the whole time, Naruto released his hold on Hinata and jumped back, allowing her to get up. It took Hinata about 3 minutes to get her bearings and she slowly stood up with a smile that almost matched Naruto's. Now it's my turn to tickle you, Naruto-san, she said with a giggle as she ran after the already running Naruto. He wasn't running on all 4s, so he was slower than before and she was keeping up with him. Hisashi watched with a smile as the 2 kids played together, laughing and smiling the whole time. He had never ever seen his niece like this before and just seeing how happy Hinata was made him happy also. Glancing at his son, he hoped that Naruto would able to be just a good friend to Neji as he was Hinata. As all Neji needed to break that stonic exterior was a friend, and Naruto might be the one to be that friend. He was knocked out of his thoughts when he heard his brother and his brother's wife walk through the door. Hiashi and Hitomi turned to Hisashi and greeted him warmly, to which he returned. Hisashi filled them in on what Naruto and Hinata had been doing, while their gaze shifted slowly to Hinata and Naruto and had to stifle a laugh at what they saw. Naruto was hanging onto a tree branch for his dear life, as Hinata was holding onto her life, except she was hanging onto his tail, weighing him down. The adults didn't feel the need to intervene, however, because the ground to Hinata's feet was only about 20 centimeters. Being that Naruto and his tail made up for the distance to make it safe. A few seconds before Naruto slipped, however, he quickly grabbed his tail with his hand and heaved it up, pulling Hinata up as he dropped down. Naruto landed upright and held out his arms as Hinata fell gracefully into them. Naruto laughed as he gently put a very shaken Hinata down on the grass. Having been launched 2 meters in the air can do that to a little 4-year-old girl. The 4 Hyuga on the porch, however, were in a similar state of shock to Hinata, except it was mainly because of Naruto's strength in holding himself up while lifting her into the air. He must have been twice as strong as the other kids his age. They threw this down to an extra of his bloodline. Sorry Hinata-chan, I didn't mean to scare you like that, I'll be more careful next time, okay? Hinata, however, entered a new state of shock at what she had heard. He called me Hinata-chan, but you only call girls that when you consider them to be a close friend. Does Naruto-san consider me his friend? Hinata was pulled out of her thoughts when she realized Naruto was staring intently at her. She apologized with a bright red face about her spacing out. And Naruto-san, I was sort of wondering why you called me Hinata-chan, and I was sort of wondering why. Oh, sorry about that, I just thought that's what you do when someone's your best friend. Well, if I got that wrong, I'm sorry. The old man only gave me a few books to learn how to speak, so I might be wrong. I just thought that we could be friends. Naruto said hopefully, although fully expecting rejection just like every other kid he met. Hinata just stared at Naruto wide-eyed as his words slowly sunk in. Do you think me as your best friend? Hinata's voice was quiet and she was blushing a red that would put tomatoes to shame, although there was that same hopeful sound that Naruto's voice had. Well, of course Hinata-chan, you are the first person to ever be so kind to me and save me, and your parents seem to be really nice too. So, I was wondering if you wanted to be friends. I promise to be the best friend ever. Naruto proclaimed while thrusting his fist into the air as seemed to be his trademark. Hinata, however, was almost brought to tears at the thought of having a friend and had a lot of trouble speaking up. After a few seconds, however, she saw Naruto's ears lower and his tail stopped moving back and forth. Oh no. He thinks I don't want to be his friend. I have to say something. Come on Hinata, say something. She was rewarded for her efforts as her mouth slowly opened and saying exactly what she wanted to, just maybe a little too loud, which caused her to blush even more. Of course Naruto-kun, I want to be your friend. Naruto's ears instantly perked up and his tail began wagging furiously. Naruto then proceeded to give Hinata a big hug while jumping up and down, yipping and shouting, I have my first friend. Hinata-chan's my best friend. The little show of friendship between Naruto and Hinata caused everyone on the porch to almost cry except Neji and Hiashi, who just smiled happily. After Naruto slowly calmed down, he released Hinata from his hold. When he did this, however, he misjudged the length of his claws and scratched Hinata only slightly but deep just above her elbow. Her shriek notified him that something was wrong, and when his nose caught the scent of Hinata's blood, he looked horrified at where he had just cut her. Hinata's tears burst from her eyes as the pain registered in her mind, and Naruto thought he was falling into complete darkness as the memories of what happened last time this happened resurfaced in his mind. You little demon. Get away from my daughter. Wondering what would happen next, he turned and looked at the 4 adults on the porch that were staring at him intently. Although Naruto wasn't sure what their expression were from the distance he was at, he was sure they were angry. His fears were proven true when he saw Hitomi rush from the porch towards them. Turning back to a shaking Hinata who was clutching her arm, Naruto tried desperately to think of something he could do. What have I done? I hurt Hinata-chan, my first friend, and I hurt her. I really am a monster. I'm a monster who hurts his friends. As he looked at Hinata with feelings of utter guilt at injuring his new friend, he remembered something he used to do to his own wounds that would heal them quickly. Jumping quickly behind Hinata, he gently grabbed her arm and pulled it back towards him. Feeling him grab her arm from behind startled Hinata and made her jump slightly while releasing her hold on her arm. Naruto then proceeded to move her arm towards his mouth. When close enough, he began to lightly and gently lick the wound clean. He didn't like that taste of her blood, but it had to be done, and within seconds the same thing that happened to him happened to her. The wound on her arm slowly stopped bleeding and began to slowly close over. By the time Hitomi reached her daughter, she stood shocked at what she saw. The cut on Hinata's arm was almost fully healed and continued without a problem until it was fully closed over, healed without a scar. Hinata, now no longer in pain, and Hitomi wanting to question him on how he did that, turned to Naruto. What they saw reminded them of when he first woke up. He was once again bending low, as was his show of submission. He was shaking slightly, obviously very upset of what he did, even if it was an accident. Hitomi took a step forward to try and calm him down and explained to him that she knew it was an accident, but as she did step forward, Naruto stepped back. I'm really sorry Hinata-chan Hitomi-san, for being such a monster. Naruto was tearing up as everything slowly caught up to his racing mind and began to sink in. I have to go, this is no place for a monster. Without a word or a chance to catch him, Naruto sped off into the Hyuga Gardens, looking for a place to either hide or leave through. To him he had done the worst thing possible, hurt someone who showed him so much kindness and acceptance, without thinking about how much of a monster he was like all the other villagers. As he ran, being as the panic state he was unable to hear the pleas from Hitomi and Hinata yelling for him to come back, that they knew it was only an accident and not his fault. Hisashi and Niji caught up to Hitomi and Hinata and all began looking around with their Byakugans to find him. He was quick when he wanted to be, as he was almost out of their range. Hisashi spotted the little Hanyou trembling and crying under a bush to the far right of the hedge maze and began to direct everyone to him. He noticed that something was off with Naruto's hands, his claws looked like they had been capped with pieces of wood. Upon reaching the entrance to the maze he stopped and looked towards his family. Did you see the look in his eyes when he realized he hurt Hinata-chan? He honestly believes that he is a monster, doesn't he? But why would a child think that of themselves? From what I saw while he was playing with Hinata-chan, he really liked and seemed proud of his fox features. Everyone looked at him, then back towards the direction Naruto was while contemplating how to explain to Hisashi just how bad Naruto's life was. It was Hitomi who eventually spoke up. I can tell you what details I have found out from a little research, but from what I can personally vouch for, Naruto-kun is beaten and abused on a regular basis by pretty much the whole village. As far as physical damage goes, they dish out whatever they see fit and he has never lifted a finger in defense. He heals from most of these wounds, but it's the mental damage that really gets to him. Could you imagine Hisashi-kun living every day in fear of someone trying to kill you, hurt you, while walking through a village where they all despise your very existence? Naruto-kun seems to have suffered through that every day of his life and his only question he ever asked these people was why. By the end of her short explanation, Hisashi was almost brought to tears and he now realized on why Naruto thought of himself as a monster, because all the villagers every day say that he is one and now he has started to believe them. We need to help him and tell him it is okay. But before Hisashi could take a step into the maze he felt a small hand grab onto his pants. Looking down he saw Hinata staring up to him with watery eyes. Nodding in silent agreement and understanding, Hisashi stepped back and allowed Hinata to walk through into the maze. She was after all probably the best choice to calm Naruto down, as he seemed to highly value his new friendship with her, if his little spectacle before he scratched her was any indication. Hitomi stepped forward after a while and also began to walk in the maze to go to Naruto. She was asked why she also was going in, to which she replied that Naruto needed to know that she nor any of the adults were angry at him and that they all knew it was an accident. Receiving nods of agreement she turned back around and walked into the maze, but not before leaving instructions that she wanted lunch ready for them all before she came back out. Naruto sat under a random bush in the maze whimpering, insulting himself and asking himself why he was such a monster. All the while the only thoughts on his mind were the image of Ino's mother yelling at him for hurting her daughter and the look on Hinata's face when he hurt her. He never saw Hitomi's face when she came over to him, but he assumed that she looked just like Ino's mother did. Why? Naruto asked himself with a face full of tears. Why do I always hurt everyone? Maybe the villagers are right, maybe I did hurt lots of people, maybe I just don't remember it. While thinking these hurtful thoughts of himself his mind soon turned to Hinata. She was my first friend and I hurt her. Why do I always hurt everyone? I didn't mean to. Why does nothing in my life ever go like I wanted to? Just then Naruto's nose caught onto a familiar scent. Don't come near me Hinata-chan, I might hurt you again. I'm sorry, I'm such a monster who hurts his friends. Naruto just heard more footsteps as Hinata slowly walked towards him. He turned his face away as she bent down and crawled into the bush he was hiding in. He didn't want to have to face her and she shouldn't have to look at a monster. What she did though was completely unexpected and Naruto froze up like last time. She hugged him. Please don't Hinata-chan, I hurt you, I don't deserve to be your friend. Hinata's response was to just hug him tighter. You aren't a monster Naruto-kun, you are a fox boy and you are my best friend. I know that you didn't mean to hurt me and you felt bad and then healed me with your licking, so I forgive you. Hinata's voice was kind and sweet and Naruto found it hard to answer her back as his tongue felt like it was stuck in his throat. The same feelings that he had when Hitomi hugged him returned, except this time it was different. This time he knew exactly what he felt. This time it felt like the hug of a true friend. Like last time it was too overwhelming and Naruto began to once again cry while telling Hinata how sorry he was for hurting her and thanking her for forgiving him. This all stopped however when he heard Hitomi call to him from a few bushes away. She had obviously heard him. Naruto Uzumaki. Come here this instant. Hitomi's voice sounded very angry and Naruto knew what would come, so pulling himself out of Hinata's hug and dropping low to the ground, he slowly crawled out of the bushes to meet his fate. As he emerged from the bush he found himself face to feet with Hitomi. Slowly looking up to see her face while still keeping his head low, Naruto expected to see her face distorted with fury, just like all the others. But instead he did see an angry face, but Hitomi's face looked angry because of disappointment. Disappointment in him maybe, but why? Naruto Uzumaki. Do you always tell the truth? Naruto nodded while still keeping his head low. Do you never go back on your word? Again Naruto nodded. And do you always keep your promises? Again Naruto nodded and Hitomi bent low so that she was almost touching his nose with hers. Naruto, fearful of what was about to come, stared up at her with teary eyes. Then answer me this, Naruto Uzumaki, if you always keep your promises, never go back on your word and always tell the truth, then why did you lie to me? Naruto's eyes widened at that. She wasn't angry that he had hurt Hinata, but angry because he lied. But he never lied to her, did he? I don't understand, Hitomi-sen. I never lied to you. Please tell me what I have done, please. Naruto's tears for the 1000th time and his life fell freely from his face. He was so confused. The villagers always accused him of things, and now even Hitomi was doing the same thing. Standing back up tall, Hitomi looked down at the submitting Hanyou and shook her head. Oh, but you did lie, Naruto-kun. You promised me that you wouldn't ever refer to yourself as a monster, remember? Hitomi gave Naruto a little time to think back to when he woke up at the hospital, and as the realization hit him, Naruto's eyes widened. See, you remember now, don't you, Naruto-kun? So what do you say when you lie to someone? Naruto had to think hard on this one. No one ever asked him on what he should say to someone when he lied. It took him a few minutes, but he finally realized it was the same few words that he said almost every day. I'm sorry, Naruto said in a very quiet voice. Sorry for what, Naruto-kun? Hitomi quipped back at him, sounding quite motherly. I'm sorry, Hitomi-san, for breaking my promise and calling myself a monster. Hitomi smiled and bent low again, this time picking Naruto up by under his armpits and hoisting him into the air. You're such a silly boy, Naruto-kun. None of us adults were angry that you hurt Hinata-chan, as we could all clearly see it was an accident. And plus, you also healed the wound. It seems as though your healing ability is also passed on through your saliva, which I might add is a wondrous and truly amazing ability to have. Now come on, we are going back into the Hyuga mansion, we need to get you some lunch. You're bound to starving after being in a coma for a week. Hitomi pulled the small pieces of wood he had stuck to his fingers off and turned to the bush where Naruto had emerged from and called for her daughter. Waiting until Hinata had crawled out of the bushes, she took her daughter by the hand and Hitomi walked back out of the hedge maze with Naruto in one arm and Hinata's hand in her the other. Hinata whispered to her mother that Naruto had grabbed some apples down from the apples tree to feed them both, but her mother just smiled and said that he looked like he was still hungry. Upon arriving at the dining room, Naruto's mouth and nose almost hit the floor. Upon the table was a vast array of sandwiches, pork cuts and salads. Although it wasn't actually that much, to Naruto it was a banquet for a king. Hitomi, realizing that Naruto was drooling everywhere, slowly closed his mouth and placed him in his designated seat on the left next to Hinata. Hisashi and Neji sat on the other side of the table, while Hitomi and Hiashi sat next to Hinata. After his servant placed a few things on each of their plates, they gave a short thank you then dug into their lunch. Well, what you could call digging in for a Hyuga, to Naruto it almost looked like they were eating with the Fire Lord. After a few moments of eating together and talking, Hitomi looked over to Naruto to see how he was doing, worried that he might feel slightly uncomfortable and not be eating. He did look very nervous, but to her surprise she couldn't see a thing on his plate. Thinking that the servant purposely left him out, she picked up a few sandwiches and put them onto his plate. Naruto thanked her and she returned to her own seat. After a few more minutes she looked back only to notice that his plate was once again empty. Naruto-kun, where did your lunch go? She asked, quite curious as to where it disappeared. I'm not sure if it's the right word, but according to the old man, it went to my stomach, just like the first 6 sandwiches. Hitomi's eyes widened at this, and she almost dropped her fork. You mean you have already eaten 10 sandwiches? Hitomi's voice was full of shock when she spoke, and hearing what she said the others turned to Naruto with open mouths. Nervous and thinking he did something wrong, Naruto apologized to them, which only caused them to stare at him even more, that is until Hisashi burst out in laughter. Ahahahaha. He's just like his father. Realizing exactly what he said, Hisashi quickly covered his mouth. But it was too late and Naruto had heard. Hitomi just gave Hisashi a death glare because of his foolish mistake, and Hiashi muttered something about brothers and their big mouths. Naruto looked up from his place and stared at Hisashi excitedly, his tail moving quickly. You knew my father. What was he like? Did he look like me? What animal did his bloodline make him like? Where is he? Is he in Konoha? Does he know me? Do I know him? Naruto's quick-paced questions were expected by the adults, especially the two where he asked if they knew each other. Naruto stared at Hisashi as patiently as he could while Hisashi thought of a way to explain the boy's father to him. Your father was a great man to this village, Naruto-kun. Sadly he is no longer with us. He died the night of the nine-tailed fox's attack. I wish I was able to tell you your father's name, but for safety reasons I can't tell you. Naruto looked a little disheartened at this, but as soon as Hisashi continued his talk, he perked back up. He was a remarkable ninja though, one of the best, and he was always busy with some of the hardest missions available. But somehow he always found time to spend with his wife, your mother. Hisashi watched with a smile as the Hanyou in front of him was practically worshipping him because he was telling him a few facts about his parents. His grin also seemed to increase as he mentioned his mother. As far as what he looked like, it's safe to say you look quite like him, although there are a few things that you predominantly got from your mother. And as to what animal his bloodline gave him, well, it's also safe to say that his was a fox as well, except maybe for different reasons. Hisashi turned his gaze with a smile to a few female servants around them, with faces blushing bright red. In Konoha, Naruto's father was considered a lady killer for one fact alone, they pretty much all fainted whenever they were around him, and to have a crush on the yellow flash of Konoha was not an uncommon practice. Naruto didn't get the different reasons part as he was already over the moon in happiness that he was hearing about his parents. Something he thought would never happen to him. Did you know my mother too? Naruto's speech was incredibly fast-paced and they had trouble understanding his short sentence, but luckily they had already preempted his question. Naruto waited expectantly while looking at Hisashi, but Hisashi just said it was better for Hitomi to answer anything about his mother as she was her best friend. Well, Naruto-kun, there is quite a lot to say about your mother as she was definitely quite the individual. She had long bright red hair, beautiful green eyes and the perfect figure. And you could also say that she was a fox like you and your father. Hitomi paused to see the slight amount of blood that seemed to trickle down each of the male servants' noses around them. Unlike your father, it is safe to say your mother's name as she wasn't well known outside of a few people and places. Your mother's name was Kushina and she was quite the woman. Her personality was quite colorful would be the right word, as she was always the loudest and most straightforward person you would ever meet and very much believed in truth. She also believed that people should value family, friends and loved ones above all, else even ninja duty. Well, quite revolutionary, she did still find time to spend with your father both alone and on missions. They were quite the pair, those two, almost inseparable. That is until the night of the nine-tailed fox's attack. Sadly the fox killed your father and your mother, except your mother died because of the incredible strain her body took when giving birth to you while fighting off the effects of the fox's chakra. Hitomi's voice became quiet as she mentioned her friend's death, but seeing Naruto's ears slowly drop low, she decided to add one final comment. Even though your parents both died, Naruto-kun, they loved you very much. I still remember your mother chatting away about how much she couldn't wait for you to be born so she could hold you in her arms. And your father always went on about how much he wanted to teach you how to be the most powerful ninja you could be. They loved you so much, Naruto-kun, and it was heartbreaking to many people that they died that awful night. But at least one good thing came from that night, you're still here. Hitomi looked up to Naruto and saw him crying his heart out, thinking she had hurt him by bringing up his parents. She walked over to him and gave him a hug. But what he said as she held him told her that his tears were tears of joy. They loved me, they really did. I wasn't abandoned, they loved me, I wasn't just left in an orphanage, I was wanted. Happy tears flooded off Naruto's face, and Hitomi continued to hold him until he stopped. She was a little upset to hear that he thought that his parents abandoned him to the orphanage, but she guessed that was once again an idea he got from the stupid villagers. Hisashi and Hiashi were both pleased that Naruto had heard about his parents, and they had managed to avoid any possible questions that could have meant that they would have had to end the conversation. Hitomi used her hand to wipe the tears from his face, brushing against his whisker marks, causing him to giggle slightly. Noticing his sensitivity to her touch on his cheeks, she brushed them again. Hinata looked over at the giggling Naruto as Hitomi continued to rub his cheeks, although now just for amusement, as he began laughing so hard that he could barely move. Hinata looked at him with a huge grin, and Hitomi stopped realizing what was about to happen. So you are ticklish too, Naruto-kun. Hinata said with a giggle. She jumped for him and tried to grab him so she could pay him back for tickling her earlier. Unfortunately for her, Naruto was just too quick. He had already jumped out of Hitomi's hold and was running on all fours as quickly as possible to get out of the house, looking over his shoulder as Hinata got up to chase him. As the children ran out of the house, Hisashi began to laugh out loud again. Ahahaha. He is like his father. Already got girls running after him. Everyone in the room sweat dropped and Hiashi just shook his head at his brother's actions. Even though they were twins, Hisashi always did seem like the odd one out, saying things that were only on the minds of others. Brother, you really are a fool. Hiashi told his brother in his I'm super serious voice, which only seemed to make his brother laugh more. Only because I don't have a serious pole stuck up my arse by the elders. Hisashi shot back though his laughs. This caused everyone in the room to freeze, fully expecting Hiashi to get angry. Instead, he only shook his head with a smile and replied, "That may be so, brother, but you seem to forget that you once had a similar incident when your dear wife Asano-chan caught you peeking on woman in the bathhouse with your Byakugan when you were younger. It wasn't quite a pole, but it did the trick. What did she call it? Oh, that's right, the 1,000 years of gentle fist." Hisashi visible paled, and his laughing instantly stopped, only to be replaced by a face of pure horror as the memory returned to him. And as fate would have it, a certain person happened to enter the room just at that moment. "Did someone mention my variation technique?" A sickly sweet but evil-sounding voice called from behind Hisashi. Hisashi paled even more if possible and slowly looked behind him and embraced a leg standing there, repeating over and over that he didn't peek on anyone and that he really didn't wish to see or feel that technique again. "It's alright, Hisashi-kun, I know that you wouldn't after that interesting experience. Thank you, Hisano-chan, I really didn't peek, I promise I have eyes only for you." Hisashi's words were a little off and he didn't sound right, obviously still scarred from the memory. His words sounded remarkably similar to those when he was trying to apologize to her all those years ago. After a few minutes, Hisashi slowly returned to his normal self, if just a bit more quieter, and the four adults began to talk amongst themselves. Niji had already dismissed himself as he went to make sure Hinata stayed safe, to which his father and mother commented that he should join in playing with them instead of just watching. After about 2 hours of general chatting and Hisashi and Hiashi arguing over which Uchiha member of the council was the most stuck up, Hisano decided to ask about Naruto, as she had heard a few hours ago that he had woken up today. "So how is the little fox boy doing? I heard he woke up today and is already up and about. Quite a remarkable recovery if you ask me," she asked with an inquisitive look. "He seems to have recovered physically faster than thought possible, but he seems to believe that he is some sort of monster, probably the villagers doing from their constant abuse of him. Currently he is outside in the gardens playing with Hinata-chan. They seem to have already become good friends, which I believe will be good for both of them, as Naruto-kun really needed someone that wouldn't treat him worse than dirt, and Hinata-chan really needed someone to have around her to help boost her confidence." Everyone around her nodded their heads in agreement and Hisano dismissed herself so that she could introduce herself to Naruto. About 5 seconds after she left, she ran back inside the house, looking for the nearest camera. After finding one, she quickly told everyone to come and look at Hinata and Naruto. After all four adults wandered outside curiously and spotted the children, Hisano and Hitomi both cried out "Kawaii," while Hisashi and Hiashi just smiled. Naruto was lying on the grass with his legs and arms spread right out while his tail slowly moved back and forth. Hinata was lying at a right angle to him on her side with her head resting on his stomach. Both of them were soundly asleep with big grins on their face. Niji was still sitting on the porch watching them. "Niji-kun, why did you not join in with them?" Hisano asked her son. To which he just replied that it was his duty to make sure Hinata was safe, nothing more. Hisashi just shook his head at his 6-year-old son's obsession with duty. "Looks like they exhausted themselves from playing together over the last 2 hours." Hisashi stated like no one already knew. To which Hisano replied in a deadpan voice, thanking him for stating the obvious. After taking a few photos for both memory and blackmail's sake, the adults moved to pick the children up. "Take Naruto-kun to the guest room next to Niji's room. I will make sure Hinata-chan is tucked in," Hitomi said while gently picking her daughter up off of Naruto's stomach. "And watch his tail, if you bend it you might hurt him." When Hinata and Naruto were both tucked in their beds, the four adults once again converged to discuss what was to happen to Naruto, as the council wanted him gone by tomorrow morning. They discussed a few ideas before Hitomi spoke up with the finalized idea. "I will take Naruto-kun to see the Hokage in the morning, as you all know what the council will do if he stays here any longer." Naruto-kun seems to be on quite a friendly basis with the Hokage, if the old man he has referred to as him. Hopefully the Hokage can provide him with a place to stay and Anbu guards to keep him safe. "I will also discuss a few matters with the Hokage while I am there, some of them will be quite interesting." The others nodded their heads in agreement, all silently hoping that the Hokage could do something to help the little Hanyou. Chapter 4. Bravery for a friend. Naruto's sleep was everything that you would not call peaceful. Tossing and turning in your sleep is one thing, but growling and yelping is another. Hitomi and Hiashi, who were only 2 rooms down from Naruto, were woken up early in the morning by animalistic growls. Disturbed from their sleep and curious and worried about what was causing those odd growls, they both followed the sound into Naruto's room. Seeing him there tossing and turning while growling irregularly more than worried both of them, and they attempted to wake him up by gently pushing him on the shoulder. This seemed to do nothing and they pushed him harder this time and repeated it until they figured that he wasn't going to wake. However, when his growling stopped only to be replaced by whimpers and tears, they shoved him a lot harder, almost shaking him. Naruto's eyes shot open and he jumped up quickly, his eyes and ears dashing to all sides of the room until they made contact with Hitomi and Hiashi, both looking at him with worried eyes. Realizing it was only a dream, Naruto plopped down onto the bed and began to cry. Hitomi, realizing that his dream must have been really horrifying to cause such a reaction, hopped up onto the bed next to him and held him close to her. Naruto's cries slowly ebbed away from the comforting hold he was in and soon became nothing but sniffles. Hitomi was about to ask Naruto if he wanted to talk about his bad dream when he spoke up. They were hurting me again. Everyone around me was hurting me and I couldn't move. They were all calling me N names and throwing things at me. I kept asking them why they were hurting me, but they didn't answer. They just kept hurting me. Naruto's sniffles increased a little and Hitomi pulled him closer, letting him know she was there. Then they all jumped back almost like they were afraid of me. Now I don't know why, but instead of being afraid I felt angry at them, very angry, and I growled at them. They backed off more as I did and SM started running. Then Hinata-chan appeared and ran to me. She wasn't scared of me like they were and she wrapped her hands around me and told me to calm down. I quickly lost the anger I was feeling and started to cry. Then the V villagers turned back and saw Hinata-chan. Naruto's eyes began to tear up again and tears begun to fall, his voice becoming more raspier as he spoke. And they grabbed her off me and they started to hurt her too. They called her names and hurt her, all because she was near me. I didn't know what to do. They were hurting Hinata-chan because of me, calling her names because of me. I was my fault. Naruto burst once again into full-blown tears and cried into Hitomi's sleeve as she tightened her hold on him again. All the while Naruto was saying over and over again that they were hurting Hinata because of him, because it was his fault. Naruto suddenly pulled himself out from her hold and began to sniff the air. He jumped off the bed and headed for the door, just in time for Hinata to walk to the front of the door holding a pillow in her hands. Before she could ask what was wrong with Naruto to make him cry in his sleep, she was grabbed by Naruto and pulled close while he wrapped himself around her, tail and all, causing her to let out a small eep. I won't let them hurt you, Hinata-chan, not because of me. I'll protect you from them. They won't ever touch my best friend. I promise you they won't. Naruto repeated this sentence over and over while he held Hinata. Hinata, thinking that his nightmare must have been something really terrible to cause something like this, continued to hold him back and rub his ears until he calmed down. By the time he had calmed down though, Naruto had fallen asleep while holding Hinata. Confused on what to do, Hinata looked pleadingly up into her mother's eyes. Hitomi, realizing that Naruto had fallen asleep and had not let go of Hinata, slowly walked towards them and gently pried Naruto of Hinata. Gently placing him back in his bed and pulling up the covers, Hitomi gave Naruto a goodnight kiss on the forehead and walked out of his room, grabbing Hinata by the hand to put her back to her bed. She gave one final look at Naruto before also walking back to his bed. Looks like they have damaged him more than we thought. The look in his eyes when he recounted his dream. I don't want to know what horrible things he saw them do to Hinata-chan. Let's hope that the Hokage is able to provide him with enough safety so that his life improves beyond what it is now, at least having Hinata-chan as a friend and us as adults who don't treat him like dirt as seem to do something for him. It is easy to tell that we have already found a place in his still pure heart. At least the villagers couldn't damage that. The next morning Naruto woke peacefully as warm sunbeams shone through the window in his room onto his face, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, and slowly pulled himself up. Looking around and studying the room he was in, Naruto slowly became frightened as he didn't know where he was. Before he could freak out, however, the memories of yesterday returned to his mind, to which he gave a big smile and his eyes became teary. He had found people who weren't like the villagers, who treated him like a normal person, and he had made his first friend. Naruto, now re-energized by the happy memories, jumped out of bed and ran towards the only door in his room, but not before noting that there was a small bundle of clothes next to his bed with a note on it. Curiosity got the better of him and he bounced over to the bundle of clothes and read the note. Not being too proficient in reading, Naruto found it a little difficult to make out what it said, but after a few tries he was able to decipher it. Naruto had heard that it is usually quite unheard of for a child of only 5 being able to read, but the old man had given him a few books when he was at the orphanage and not ever being read to by anyone and usually being locked in his dorm by himself for days on end, he decided to teach himself to read them. Dear Naruto, the Ashi and myself had to attend a clan meeting early this morning and won't be back until about 10:30 a.m. I have already organized a friend to provide you with fresh cloths as well as a bath, and breakfast will be prepared for you when you are ready. You are welcome to venture anywhere in the Hyuga compound, but I recommended that you don't leave the safety of the main house and the gardens. We will see you as soon as we are back, as we need to have a talk with you about something very important. With love, from Hitomi. Naruto read the letter a few more times to make sure he understood it all, then changed into the new cloths that were left for him. There was one thing that he didn't understand in the note, however. What is a bath? As soon as he left the room, a branch member approached him and gave him a small bow, to which he returned with a smile and a wary hi. She seemed nice at first glance, but Naruto wasn't sure whether or not to trust her. She looked about 15 and wore a bright yellow kimono with white flowers on it, contrary to the usual white that all the other Hyugas wore. Her brown hair was long and pulled back into a ponytail. Her face was as flawless as one would expect from a Hyuga, and her eyes were the same as all other Hyugas. What caught Naruto's attention though was a white band she wore across her forehead. He had seen the same thing on Niji's forehead, but forgot to ask about why he wore it. Naruto had noticed that a lot of the Hyuga he saw wore those white bands, and he was curious as to what they were. "Good morning Naruto-san, I have been given instructions with looking after you until Hitomi-sama and Hiashi-sama return. My name is Toru Sisam Hyuga, but you can call me just plain Toru." Her voice sounded energetic and quite sweet, and upon hearing her friendly tone, Naruto lightened up a little. The young woman in front of him then gave him a small grin before gently grabbing him by the hand and leading him to the bathroom. Naruto didn't quite know what to think of Toru, he didn't detect any ill intentions from her, so decided that she was alright for the time being, but that doesn't mean that he wasn't prepared to bolt in the other direction if the need arose. Toru didn't really know what to think of Naruto either, she had been there when the third Hokage explained what the fourth had done, and that during the sealing Naruto had become a Kitsune Hanyou. She believed that the seal had kept the nine-tailed fox's influence away from Naruto and that he was in control of his own body, but she wasn't sure to what degree and also didn't know whether or not the seal would actually hold forever. She had heard from Hitomi that he was perfectly fine, but he just had some animalistic behavior. She did find his ears, tail and whiskers extremely cute however. When they reached the bathroom Toru opened the door and lead him in, releasing his hand she turned on the taps for the bath and added a few salts to it while Naruto watched curious as to what she was doing. After a few minutes the bath was full and she turned to Naruto with a grin and gestured towards the bath. After a few minutes of silence Naruto was confused as to what she wanted him to do and asked her. She gave a small giggle and said that he just had to hop in the bath and she would help wash him. "Bath, what is a bath?" Naruto asked with his head cocked to the side. He then turned back to the large white bowl-shaped object now full of water then asked. "Is that a bath?" Toru giggled again, thinking that Naruto was just being silly. So she simply decided to play along. "Yes Naruto-san, that is a bath, they are for washing yourself." Naruto upon hearing this turned his gaze to the bath and stared at it wide-eyed. "So that's what all the other kids were washed in. I always wondered how they were washed at the orphanage, I always was just given a small bucket to wash myself with." Naruto, excited about having something that all the other kids got, jumped up and down excitedly while yipping and saying that he was going to get to have his first bath. Toru was too busy laughing at the little fox boy in front of her, making odd yip noises to understand what he said, that is until she started to calm down. "Wait, did he say his first bath? Naruto-san, did you say this is your first bath?" A hint of both confusion and worry was evident in the young Hyuga's voice. Mainly because of the fact that Naruto was 5 and still hadn't had a bath yet, that is 5 years of dirt and grime. "Yeah, I never got to have one. At the time I didn't know what they were, but the other kids always got one. To wash I was just given a bucket of cold water. Usually if I wanted more I would run to the river near the orphanage, but most of the time I mainly went there cause I love to swim." Naruto did this while thrusting his fist into the air. Toru giggled again at Naruto's actions, deep down she felt sad for the little Hanyou however. Hitomi had told her on how much he was abused, but she wasn't really sure if she believed them however, but with that small comment, Toru found herself believing a little more than she did before. Figuring that he should get into the bath before it went cold, she told Naruto to hold still while she undressed him. Not fully understanding what she was going to do, as Naruto had always dressed and undressed himself, it shocked him a little when she pulled off his shirt. He calmed down however when he realized she wasn't going to hurt him, she was just taking his cloths off for him, he didn't really care about her seeing him naked as he was only a child and thoughts like that never really bother kids. After Naruto was undressed he practically leapt into the bath, much to Toru's dismay as she got splashed. The next few minutes Naruto just splashed around in the large tub, diving and jumping from side to side, all the while smiling and laughing and generally having a good time. Toru had to hold onto the nearby bench when Naruto started playing with the soap, he just couldn't seem to get a grip on the slippery pink rock as he called it. It wasn't until he decided to use his claws that it stopped. However he started to sniff it and upon smelling the scent of strawberries on it, proceeded to try and eat it. The face that he pulled at the disgusting taste and his attempts to extract the nasty taste from his mouth was more than what Toru needed to burst into laughter. Naruto, realizing he had made her laugh at his misfortune, flicked his tail in her direction, sending a small splash of water directly at her head. Upon contact Toru stopped laughing and Naruto started. Toru, not wanting to be beaten by a little boy, she decided to take it up a notch. While Naruto was laughing, she filled a little bucket with cold water from the tap, turning to face him she proceeded to throw the water at him. As soon as the water struck him Naruto yelled out loud, his body was normally quite warm, and with the added temperature from the hot water in the bath, Toru's cold water hit him like ice, causing his tail and ears to go pointy, and the hair on them stick up as Naruto shivered from the freezing contact. Figuring that he had lost he called a truce as he really didn't want any more freezing water on him. Toru however was still rolling on the floor in laughter. Ahahaha. Did you see your face? When the water touched you it looked like you turned into a statue. Waiting patiently until Toru settled down, Naruto asked if there was a comb he could borrow to brush his tail. Finding it cute that he brushes his tail, because at his age most don't even brush their hair, Toru rushed over to a nearby cupboard and pulled out a small white comb and a few bottles marked shampoo and conditioner. Walking over to Naruto, she gave him the comb but told him to wait until she washed his hair and tail. Not really knowing what she was on about, Naruto just let her do whatever she said she would do. He was surprised when she squirted some of the substance in the bottle she brought onto his head and along his tail. He was just as surprised when she started rubbing the smelly liquid into his hair, which produced a type of white foam. She kept rubbing for about 5 minutes, then filled a bucket with warm water and washed the foam of his head. She did the same thing to his tail, then repeated the whole procedure with the other bottles. When she was finished, Naruto was sure there was a shine to the fur on his tail. He quite liked it, and he expressed his gratitude by wagging his tail while thanking her, all the while with a big smile on his face. As he started to comb his freshly cleaned tail, he initiated a small conversation with Toru. By now he had come to the conclusion that Toru was one of the nice people who did like him, which was more than enough to merit his trust. Toru-san, can I ask you a few questions? To which Toru nodded with a smile. Why is it some Hyuga have that white headband and others don't? I noticed it the other day. I saw Niji-san and a few other people who made our lunch. Toru's eyes darkened for a split second, and Naruto thought that he had said something wrong, but when she looked up at him, he noticed that her eyes were pained, not angry, and he was confused why. Toru in response put her hands behind her head and undid the white sash and let it fall to the ground. Naruto gasped at what he saw. On her head was a green tattoo that was made up of an X in the middle and 2 canes pointing away from it. Asking what it was, Toru found it difficult to reply. Well, to explain its purpose I will have to tell you a bit about Hyuga traditions. Originally, at the start of the clan, the elders decided that there should be a family that ruled and another that protected, thus the main and branch families were created. However, the elders over time came to fear the numbers of the branch family and the possibility that they didn't like their role as servant, so to prevent a clan feud, the elders set out to create a means to protect themselves from their protectors in case they should turn on them, and as a result, the caged bird seal was created. The function of the seal is to subdue its bearer if anyone of the main house needed to by attacking the brain cells directly, causing indescribable amounts of pain. It also seals away the Byakugan when we die so that it cannot be stolen. However, over time its use became corrupted and the main house more power hungry. Now it is used as an implement of fear that the main house could activate the seal at any time. They use this to turn us into their willing servants to do for them whatever they want. Toru's voice was almost a growl by the time she finished her explanation. Naruto's growl, however, was the real thing. What? How can they do that? You can't make slaves out of your own family, that is so wrong. Is there any way to remove it? That is true, Naruto-san, it is wrong, and no, there is no way to remove the seal that we know. Not without killing the person anyway. Toru's voice was still full of anger and hatred at the main house, which brought a question to Naruto's mind. What about Hiashi-san and Hitomi-san, do they think the same way? Naruto really didn't want the image he had of the first 2 adults to be kind to him to be shattered by this ridiculous practice. Toru's mood lightened at this, and Naruto felt a little more at ease. No, they hate the caged bird seal almost as much as the branch family does and are trying to convince the council of elders to relinquish the practice and bring both of the houses together. Naruto let out a sigh of relief and Toru placed her band back over the seal. Naruto didn't talk for a while and looked to be in deep thought. Upon coming back to reality, he proclaimed that he would find a way to remove the seal. Toru tried to convince him that it was impossible, but Naruto wouldn't have a piece of it. No, I promised to find a way to remove the seal from you and all the branch members, and I always keep my promises. Naruto said while giving Toru a big grin. Toru just wished him a casual good luck, but deep down she wished that he would someday be successful. The next 20 minutes progressed well, and Naruto and Toru chatted about all sorts of things. Toru was surprised at how enthusiastic he was when he spoke, but ruled it down to the fact that he was still a child. When the conversation slowly died down, Naruto turned to her with eyes full of hope. He also went to speak, but stopped before any words came out. Confused as to what he was trying to say, she just patiently waited for him to find the right words. Toru-san, I was just wondering if you would like to be my friend. I don't have much to offer, but I promise to be the best friend I can. That's if you want to, that is. Toru just smiled and walked over him with a towel in her hands. Lifting him out of the bath, she began to dry his head. Naruto, thinking she didn't want to be his friend, started to look rejected. But when Toru removed the towel off his head, she was kneeling in front of him with a big smile on her face. Of course, Naruto-kun, I would love to be your friend, she said with a happy smile. Naruto practically leapt into her arms and yipped happily and repeated over and over that Toru-chan was his new friend. After he calmed down a little, she put the still bouncing Hanyou on the ground and picked up the towel again to finish drying him. After Naruto was dried and Toru had dried her hair from when Naruto flicked the water at her earlier, she helped dress him back up and led him to the main eating hall of the branch family. Upon arriving, Naruto noticed that there was at least 100 Hyuga present, all eating breakfast and talking together along long oak tables. Naruto could hear some guy say something that resembled a joke, but he didn't seem to get the punchline. Naruto felt slightly vulnerable in such a large crowd, and his nervousness seemed to show as his freshly washed hair on his ears and tail seemed to stick up slightly. Realizing that Naruto must be worried about them turning around and attacking him, so she knelt down and gently grabbed his hand for reassurance and led him towards their designated seats. Along the way, Naruto noticed a few Hyuga stopped eating their meals and turned to him. Within a few minutes the entire hall was silent and watching Naruto. Having so many people staring at him with such piercing eyes was more than enough to frighten him, and his mind began racing, thinking over and over again of what could happen to him. His eyes did pick up a few smiles, however. Perhaps they don't hate me either. Seeing Naruto was becoming frightened moved him carefully to his seat and addressed those in front of her. This is Naruto Uzumaki, and I would expect that you all show him a little more kindness than you are now. We all know what it is like to be shunned and abused by others, and yet Naruto-kun knows this more than any of you ever at the age of 5. So stop starting at him because you are frightening him and introduce yourselves. Toru's statement had a variety of reactions. Some just looked at Naruto and glared, some just looked indifferent, but most actually smiled and left their seats. Within a few minutes most of the hall had formed a line to greet the young Hanyou, some even had their children with them. They would either bow and introduce themselves and family or just shake his hand. Naruto found it quite overwhelming and began to tear a little. "What's wrong, Naruto-kun, why are you crying?" Toru asked with concern. It's just that I never knew so many people existed that could show me so much kindness. I'm just so happy that so many people accept me for who I am and not think I'm a monster." Naruto continued to cry slightly with a big smile on his face as more and more branch members introduced themselves to him. It seemed to be a regular occurrence for most of the children and most women to want to touch his ears or his tail, to which he gladly let them as it not only felt nice, but they also seemed to like it. Although Naruto's ears were starting to hurt from all the kawaiis that they heard over the next half hour. After all the introductions were over, they all returned to their breakfasts and Naruto was served his. He didn't know what exactly it was, but from the taste he assumed it was something that had fish in it. While eating came more like inhaling his breakfast, he held a light conversation with Toru, that is until he saw a group of boys staring at her and saying something. Thinking that they may have been insulting her, he turned his ears to them and listened in on their conversation. He couldn't make out most of it, but he was sure it wasn't something you should say about another person. So he turned back to Toru to confirm. Toru-chan, what does she has the biggest damn hooters, I so want to squeeze them mean." Naruto said this all too loud and a few Hyuga from nearby tables looked at him with astonishment, some even choked on their food as they started to snicker. Toru, however, had no idea what to say, remembering that he was only 5 he couldn't possibly have known what the sentence meant, which means he must have heard it somewhere recently, hence the reason he was asking. She looked down slightly and took a small glance at her chest. She was very gifted compared to most, but she didn't like people having perverted thoughts about her, so turning to Naruto with an evil-looking grin, she asked in a sickly sweet voice. "Where did you hear that rude statement, Naruto-kun?" Naruto, completely oblivious to the fury that was welling up inside of Toru, simply pointed with his tail to the group of guys he had heard it from. Toru looked at the table across the room with a glare that could have burnt them all. However, she was still confused as to when he had heard them say it because they didn't introduce themselves to him earlier. Asking him when he had heard them say it, a few of the nearby Hyuga also looked to him, finding where this conversation might go humorous, as Toru was well known to be very un-Hyuga-like whenever someone ticked her off. Naruto just gave a huge grin to this and pointed to his ears while moving them left and right. "With my ears, of course, with them I am able to hear almost all of the conversations in this room," Naruto proclaimed quite proudly. The onlooking Hyuga and Toru were both amazed at this and each placed a note for themselves not to say anything they shouldn't when within range of his hearing. Naruto, still oblivious to Toru's rage, proceeded to say a few more lines that the boys were saying. Now they said they want to grab your arse and lick your hooters. What are hooters, Toru-chan, and are they tasty? Because if they aren't, why would they want to lick them? Naruto's question for his age was completely innocent as he had no idea what they were saying. The nearby Hyugas, however, knew exactly what the group of boys were saying and started bursting out in laughter. Some even had a trickle of blood coming out of their noses and had to hide their faces. Naruto, hearing the laughter, turned to see if there was something funny. What he did see, however, was Toru rushing with a death glare to the table of boys he had pointed to before. As Toru approached them, all 5 boys shivered slightly, looking up to the source of the killer intent they were being hit with. They jumped back in fright of what they saw. Toru was standing right in front of them menacingly with a katana she had pulled from God knows where, outstretched, pointed directly towards the nearest of them. That wasn't what scared them, however. It was the evil and demonic look of pure fury that was on her face that really made them shit their pants. Literally, for the one with the sword pointed at him. "You want to lick something? Lick my katana." The boys had about half a second as the blade came down upon their table, cutting it clean in half. The boys quickly separated and began running and screaming for their lives as Toru charged after them, swinging her blade and screaming that she was going to neuter them. This type of spectacle would have made most that saw it roll on the floor in laughter, but for the Hyuga clan that prided itself on self-control, found the event so utterly hilarious that some might have even needed to go to hospital from lack of oxygen. Some of the Hyuga who were near Toru and Naruto and had heard the conversation patted him on the head and thanked him, in between breaths, for the amusing show. Naruto, still oblivious as to what the boys meant and why Toru had gotten so angry about it, just nodded his head and said a small "you're welcome." However, their fun was soon cut short when one of the Hyuga clan elders arrived through the main entry. He was furious as to what the racket was caused by, so he had decided to find out. Upon arriving through the doors, he ordered for silence. Within seconds the whole room fell silent, as if someone had hit an off switch for their laughter. Glancing around with superiority, he spotted Toru standing over a scared shitless young branch male, with her sword pointed dangerously at his nether regions. Immediately jumping conclusion, he assumed that Toru was the reason for the uproar. You have caused a disturbance for the last time, Toru. You constantly refusal to follow Hyuga standards, and you refuse to change that ridiculous kimono of yours, and it's about time you learned your place. Activate. Performing a one-handed hand sign, he activated Toru's caged bird seal. Her katana clattered to the floor as she instantly fell down, clutching her head in pain and screaming out loud. Naruto, realizing that the old man in front of them had activated her seal, appeared in front of her in almost an instant. Crouched down on all fours in front of Toru, Naruto growled deeply and stared up with angry eyes at the man who was activating her seal. "Let her go." Naruto's voice was deep and commanding, and his growling could also be heard as he spoke. The surrounding branch members were astonished that he had stood up to the elder without a thought for his safety, but then again they would also if they too didn't have the caged bird seal. Naruto's sudden appearance and his threatening stance shocked the elder slightly, and he deactivated Toru's seal by distraction. His shocked look then turned to one of pure anger, hatred and disgust as he gazed unblinkingly at the monster in front of him. Having been released from her torment, Toru looked up with grateful eyes at the little Hanyou standing in front of her. She couldn't remember anyone standing up for her like that, let alone someone she had only known for 2 hours. Then it hit her, this is what a true friend was, someone willing to put their life on the line for someone close to them. Toru's tears had been pouring off her face before from pain, but now they were falling because she was afraid of what the elder might do to Naruto. She didn't want them to kill him, and hearing stories of how much they hate him, they just might kill him. Hearing her whimpers, Naruto slowly stepped backwards till his head was near Toru's, all the while never taking his gaze off of the elder walking towards him, nor did his growling cease until he was near Toru's head. Gently wrapping his tail around her in a comforting way, he then proceeded to lick her still throbbing head that was now bare, as Toru had already ripped her band off when she fell to the floor. Within seconds Toru felt the lingering pain slowly ebb away, and the surrounding Hyuga watched on in amazement as Toru let out a relieved sigh as the pain in her head completely disappeared. Satisfied that the pain had left, his friend Naruto took a few more steps forwards and once again stood between Toru and the Hyuga elder, who was now no more than 2 meters away from them. All of the branch members in the hall silently watched as the two stared each other down for what seemed like hours. The only noise that could be heard was Naruto's deep-throated growl and Toru's still fast-paced breathing. Naruto was the first one of the two to speak. "You had no right to do that to Toru-chan. She wasn't the one who made them laugh as I originally caused this." The elder's glare didn't change, nor did his expression. He just continued to look at Naruto with cold, emotionless eyes. "You are the one with no right to tell me what I can or can't do, you little demon. And as for whose fault it was, I really don't care. She has had that coming for a long time. Now step aside, you little monster." The Hyuga is taught to always keep their emotions under control and to remain calm and collected, but the elder in front of Naruto had no qualms about showing just how much he hated Naruto, as some of the branch members in the room begun to shake from the killer intent that he was releasing. Naruto, however, still stood on all fours, unwavering. "No, but I can tell you that I will not allow anyone to hurt my friends. Not even you." Naruto's bravery was beyond most adults, so to see a 5-year-old stand up to a Hyuga elder like he was greatly increased the respect that the branch members had for the Hanyou. The elder, however, did not share their opinion, and his anger towards the little demon just increased because of the blatant disrespect that he was being shown. "I'll show you to disrespect me, you monster." And with that said, the elder charged towards Naruto. Naruto, seeing the man charge at him as plain as anything, found it easy to follow his movements and raised his arms accordingly in an X shape to block the palm thrust. However, being only 5 he didn't have that much strength to hold back a strike, let alone a Charka-powered one, and stumbled slightly backwards, which was more than enough for the elder to kick him hard in the stomach. With a loud fox-like yelp, Naruto flew back and crashed into the wall behind him, leaving a good dent in it. As Naruto's body crumbled to the floor, the elder looked over him with disgust, then turned his gaze back to Toru, but before he could even take a step towards her, he felt a presence behind him. Spinning around and fully expecting the demon to try to attack him, he took a defensive stance. However, when he did look back, all he saw was the hole in the wall with no Naruto. Not knowing where he could have gone to, the elder went to activate his Byakugan, that is until he heard a deep growling behind him. Spinning back towards the growl, he once again met Naruto's eyes. The elder was in a state of shock, however, because Naruto had got up and run behind him even before he himself turned around. His speed was quite impressive. But not only that, but Naruto didn't go and try to attack him, but just ran between him and Toru, something the branch members noted. The elder, however, was not impressed by this and just glared at the demon in front of him. Toru, however, was trying to sit up and tell Naruto that she was fine and for him to run, but as she tried to push herself up, her arms gave out and she fell again. She expected to hit the solid ground and was surprised when she landed on something soft. Opening her eyes to see what it was, she saw that she had landed on Naruto's tail. He had cushioned her landing. The surrounding Hyuga were all in shock at the devotion Naruto was showing to his friend, one that he only met a few hours before. Naruto, showing no sign of attacking, just stood on all fours growling at the elder, warning him to stay away from his friend. The elder just continued to stare daggers at the demon. "It's about time someone got rid of you, you worthless demon." The elder charged at Naruto again, but this time being more prepared and the elder being more careless due to his rage, Naruto was able to deflect the first blow, but again was unable to stop the second. Flying back and hitting another wall, Naruto yelped again from the pain, and everyone around them could have sworn they heard something crack. The elder knew better than to wait for Naruto to get up again, so instantly ran towards him with the intent to kill him. Naruto had recovered quickly from the knockback and also ran towards the elder still on all fours, to which made the elder actually smile, except it was more of a crazed one than anything. The onlooking Hyugas watched in stunned amazement as the two ran towards each other, but once again were shocked because when they were in range of each other, the elder thrust forward with a palm strike and instead of attacking back or blocking, Naruto bent low and jumped high over the elder's head, landing behind him, only to run back to in front of Toru. The branch members watching stood still as they all reevaluated their thoughts on Naruto. Sure, most of them didn't think of him as a demon, but to see him display this level of devotion to a friend was all but unheard of, and they all found themselves feeling like they should help somehow. So when the time came that the elder ran to strike Naruto again, he stopped in mid-run when he saw almost every branch member run in between him and Naruto. Demanding to know what they were doing, one branch member took a step forward. "We can't allow a friend to be hurt, not even by you." Choosing a variation of what Naruto had previously said seemed to make everyone smile. But the elder in front of them did not seem even the slightest bit amused, and he let every bit of rage he held pour out of him like a fountain when he yelled to them. "Who do you think you are, you worthless branch trash? You all forget who is in charge here, and I could easily just activate all of your seals. Speaking of which." As he finished, he raised his hand and made the necessary one-handed sign, but before he could gather any chakra, the doors behind him burst open and he was almost hit to the ground as two figures emerged from them, piercing him with their killer intent. Behind them stood Hiashi and Hitomi Hyuga. "What is going on here, Karu? I use my Byakugan to check on Naruto-kun and what do I see? You using him as target practice while he tries desperately to defend a friend which you wrongfully assaulted. Not only that, but you tried to activate the seals of all the branch family for just standing in front of you. Oh, how I would love to see your punishment, but sadly you have to be handed over to the Hokage for punishment as you broke his law and attacked Naruto-kun." Hiashi's voice was clear and commanding, and you could practically feel your body crumble under just the tone itself. Hiashi waited a few seconds so that Karu could go over what he said and so that Hiashi could calm himself down enough to say the ending statement. "And the last time I checked, Karu, the punishment for that law carried maximum imprisonment time with a chance of execution." Everyone in the room could feel the blood drain from Karu's face when he realized the complications of his actions. As Hiashi called for the guards to arrest him, Karu struggled against their hold and screamed out that they couldn't do this to him. When Karu was finally taken out of the building, Hiashi and Hitomi walked through the crowd to reach Naruto. They found him in the very center, asking Toru if she was okay. "Naruto-kun, could you please explain what happened? We saw what happened to you, but didn't see how all of this came about," Hitomi asked in a serious mother tone. Naruto just turned to them with a smile as he recounted the events that transpired since his arrival at the dining hall, including the comments that were said about Toru, much to her embarrassment. "So yeah, that's pretty much all that happened. I still don't understand what those boys meant when they made those comments about Toru-chan, but yeah, that's it. Is Toru-chan going to be alright? She looks a little sick." Hitomi and Hiashi looked down to the Hanyou in front of them, who seemed to think very little of what had actually been done to him and was more concerned with Toru. Yes, Toru-chan should be fine, Naruto-kun, she probably has mild concussion due to the seal's effect. But what about you, are you alright? Hitomi was once again doing the concerned mother thing, not that Naruto minded as it made him feel loved. Naruto reassured her that he was fine as he always was. Hitomi told him to go to the hospital just to be sure, but Naruto still said that he was fine and to take Toru there instead. A stretcher was brought to carry Toru, and before she was taken away, she ruffled Naruto's hair and thanked him for his bravery on her part. After Toru had been taken to the hospital, the remaining branch Hyugas gave a small bow to Naruto as a sign of recognition for his bravery, then returned to their breakfast while others left to start the day. All the while Hitomi and Hiashi slowly explained to Naruto that the council wanted him gone from the Hyuga compound and that they themselves tried to push for him to stay. So it's not because you don't want me here, it's what the council is threatening that I have to leave. To which Hitomi and Hiashi nodded slowly, they expect him to burst into tears, but once again he shocked them both. That's okay. I don't want any of my friends to be hurt because of me, and I'm sure the old man will be able to have a place where I could stay, he once mentioned it before I was kicked out of the orphanage. Naruto said with a big smile, it slowly faded however to a frown before he next spoke. But I'm still able to visit you whenever I want, right? Well, not really, Naruto-kun. Hitomi said with a sad face, which Naruto soon mimicked, but she said in a happier tone. Because you are the only known member of the Uzumaki clan, Naruto-kun, that automatically makes you the clan head, which means that you can come see us every Saturday and have a clan meeting with us, and there is nothing that the elders or the council will be able to do. Well, that is as long as they don't know that it isn't really a meeting. Naruto's smile took on a more mischievous look as she said this, sneaking around is what he did best, especially after all the time he had to hide from the villagers. Naruto yipped a few times, but before he started bouncing like usual he stopped and his ears began to twitch. Turning his head in the direction of where he heard the noise, he bounced off and soon arrived at his destination, right where Hinata was about to turn the corner. He hid behind the doors as Hinata, Hisashi and Hisano walked through them. They had heard about the commotion and had come to see how Naruto was doing. As they passed the doors, however, Naruto crept up behind Hinata, grabbing her shoulders with his hands. He shouted, "Hey, Hinata-chan." Now for most people a sudden surprise like that would cause most to jump a few meters into the air, but for an incredibly shy and insecure girl not quite 5 years old, it was enough to give you a heart attack or in Hinata's case faint from shock. Naruto caught Hinata with his tail so she didn't hit the ground and instantly freaked out thinking he had killed her. Everyone that knew Hinata and her tendencies to faint burst out in laughter at the poor Hanyou's misfortune, which only confused and upset Naruto even more. It was only when Hitomi found her bearings and got her laughing under control to explain to Naruto that she just fainted from shock that Naruto began to calm down. Keeping her balanced with his tail, he waited quietly until she woke up. He only had to wait a few minutes, and as soon as she was back on her feet, she blushed bright red and apologized for fainting on him. Naruto just stood there for a moment, unable to piece together properly on what she just said. Wait, that's not right, Hinata-chan, you don't have to apologize, I should be the one to say sorry because I was the one to scare you, not the other way around. So yeah, I'm sorry I scared you. Hinata's blush just increased in intensity and Naruto sat there waving his tail with a big goofy grin on his face while he rubbed the back of his head. Hitomi finally fully recovered from her laughter fits and walked over to the pair. Naruto-kun, it's time to take you to the Hokage as it would be unwise for you to stay here much longer, especially after you defended Toru-chan. Hinata, hearing both of those things for the first time, asked in a hushed voice what her mother meant by Naruto not being able to stay and him defending Toru. After going through the whole explanation on both topics, Hinata started to sob, knowing that she won't be able to see her friend anymore. Seeing his best friend cry was almost enough to make Naruto cry, and he gave her a small hug and told her about how he will be able to visit. At this time another idea popped into Hitomi's mind. And I will still take you to the park whenever I can, Hinata-chan, and we accidentally happened to see Naruto-kun there too, I don't see why you can't play with each other then. This brightened up Hinata's world and her sobbing soon stopped. She was hurt that the elders had forbidden Naruto from coming to the Hyuga compound anymore as she wouldn't be able to play with him, but hearing that he would come and visit every Saturday and that she could visit him at the park made it much easier to cope with. Again telling Naruto that it was time to go, he asked if Hinata could come as well, to which Hitomi agreed to with a smile. Seeing that Hinata had calmed down now, Hitomi walked up to them both and took them by the hand as they left the dining room and headed to the exit of the Hyuga compound to see the Hokage. What if Naruto and Hinata become Hanyou? Thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.